Its origin, alien. Location, Antarctica. Age, unknown. Intent, survival. Destination, man.
For John Carpenter's The Thing, now the ultimate alien terror is in the palm of your hand.
It's Palmer! He's turning into a thing!
Quick, Windows! Blast him with the flamethrower!
Oh no! He's got windows!
Real alien ooze!
Oh no! He's getting away!
But R.J. McCready won't let him escape.
Hey! Where's Blair?
The Thing action figures come with everything you see here. Each figure sold separately. From Hasbro.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Illegal Machine, when I texted you and asked you to do a podcast on the Thing franchise, do you remember what your response was?
It's clobbering time.
So you don't?
It's the wrong thing.
No, yeah, that's fine.
No, you said something about the Thing franchise. I assume there must be some fucking bullshit Dark Horse comic or something. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Well, it's for Dark Horse presents, so yeah, there's definitely some bullshit Dark Horse comic.
Oh shit! Or wait, was there like a sci-fi show or something?
So you're going to this pretty cold then, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, going to this kind of cold. Hey, no pun intended.
The Thing goes back to the 1930s. You knew about that?
I think it was a book, right? Or was it a book?
It's a novella. So it was a short story, Who Goes There, by John W. Campbell, although he used a pseudonym when he wrote it. It was published in the August 1938 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine. So this was like pulp shit, right?
Oh, wow.
And then it was adapted into a movie in 1951, The Thing from Another World. And you never seen that one?
No, but did Mystery Science Theater do it? Maybe? I don't know.
No, it's actually too big of a hit for Mystery Science Theater.
Was it?
Of course,
okay.
20, yeah.
That was alive, sir. I saw it. I shot at it. I hit it. I know it. Nothing happened. It just kept coming at me, making a noise like a cat mewing. Captain, it was awful. If you could have seen those hands and those eyes. You've got to do something about it. You've got.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly? Baffling questions, astounding questions that not even the world's greatest scientific minds can answer.
Gentlemen, do you realize what we've found? A being from another world, as different from us as one pole from the other. If we can only communicate with it.
See? What happened, Doctor?
In the greenhouse, I was working. I couldn't see.
Yeah.
Then a blast of cold air, and I heard Olsen scream.
Come here. Get in the corner. Now hold this in front of you. Stay by the light switch.
1.9. Needles hit the top.
It came out in 51. It was a pretty popular movie. It only made a little under $2 million, but that was enough to make it the 46th highest earner of the year. It outperformed other sci-fi classics like The Day the Earth Stood Still and When Worlds Collide. So it's pretty notable. Like when I was a kid, I had a book on movie monsters, and it talked about what the monsters were and a little bit about like the makeup effects and stuff like that. And they had a still of The Thing in that book and talked about that movie. So it was notable enough to where it made it into my little book for kids about old like this was something I got at a flea market, and all the pictures were in black and white, so it was pretty dated reference, but I think it made it up into at least the 60s and not the early 70s, and that was one of the movies they talked about in that one, along with like Lon Chaney Sr. and all the Universal monsters. I Was a Teenage Werewolf with Land and all that kind of stuff. You don't know who the monster was then. It was played by James Arness. Do you know who that is?
I do not.
Okay. Are you familiar with the show Gunsmoke?
I am familiar with Gunsmoke.
Okay, so this thing ran for like 20 some odd years. It was one of the most watched television shows ever, but certainly over the period that it ran, and he was the sheriff on Gunsmoke. But before he got famous, he played the monster in Thing from Another World.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, and of course there was pictures out there with him in the makeup and everything, and they're really good pictures, but when you watch the movie, you barely can see the guy. And so for preparation for this, I went back and I watched the old movie because I'd seen it before. I think it ran on 26 back in the day, maybe 39. So I saw it like in the 80s or something, back when, black and white movies were some of the only things that would show at certain times of the day or on the weekends and such.
Yep.
And so there's not a lot to remember. The main thing is it's very 1950s, and it's kind of cool because you know how you always think about 1950s sci-fi horror, and it's always very stiff and stagey. But one of the things that's nice with this was it had that sort of rapid fire dialogue, and it was almost like Robert Altman.
Altman, yeah.
Robert Altman. So it had that Altman-esque quality where you've got people talking over each other and stuff, and it made it a lot more dynamic. And probably one of the reasons for that is even though the credited director is Christian Naifeh, who did some stuff before and some stuff afterwards, but most people think that the main person who was the talent behind the movie was Howard Hawks, who was one of the most well-regarded directors of his time. And basically, I think he was either building out his own fiefdom within RKO Radio Pictures, or it was his company, I don't know which. But Hawks was basically telling the director what to do and helping him set up shots and stuff, to the point where a lot of people thought that he was a director. And then there are other cast members who said, no, for sure Naifeh was the director. But even Naifeh says, well, the master's teaching me and I'm going to do what the master says. So he was basically executing Howard Hawks' vision. And again, one of the greatest directors of all time, doing a sci-fi horror movie, that was a pretty nice treat for that time period. And so that's probably why you had some of that more advanced filmmaking techniques for what could have been a kind of a throwaway movie. The basics of the movie are fairly similar. You got people out in the Arctic and they find an alien encased in ice. They find the spaceship. They bring the alien ice, thing, the Captain America basically, into the base, and they're letting him kind of just sit there. There's a soldier who's supposed to be watching him. He's not really paying attention. They've thrown an electric blanket on top of the ice. It melts the ice enough to where this creature escapes. And it basically just ends up going outside and gets attacked by sled dogs. He kills some of the dogs, but they do manage to cut off the creature's arm. They tear off one of his arms. And, again, it's 1951, so I'm shocked even as a kid, like they would reference a dismemberment in an old-timey movie, right? And so what they were able to determine about this creature was, in the first movie, it's actually supposed to be more like a vegetation. It's like an animated vegetable, like they call it a super carrot at one point, but it doesn't reproduce like normal humans, and it's not vulnerable the way humans are. So when they shoot it and stab it, it isn't really majorly harmed. And so what it keeps doing is this creature feeds on blood. So it keeps breaking into parts of the Arctic base. It kills a dog, it kills a few people, it's causing problems. And of course there is paranoia, but it's mostly just paranoia about where is it going to strike next and trying to stop it. And eventually the guys get together and they set a trap for him and they electrocute the creature. And it wasn't the best executed stunt. They almost electrocuted the cast too during the making of the movie. But it's a pretty good flick actually. Like I said, I rewatched it. I think it was on Tubi or one of the free streamers. It's only a little over an hour, I think, and it's definitely worth watching. It's got some nice cinematic quality to it, and I will say that the performers are too old-timey and too big, so that the overlapping dialogue sometimes just confuses you, and it definitely sounds like staged dialogue overlapping instead of naturalistic like you get from a Robert Altman movie. But it's still pretty cool, and it's got a nice pizzazz to it. The girl who's the lead is pretty hot, and she has a lot to do. And also one thing that's interesting is it's got one of those very much paranoia about science aspect to it, which used to be a novel thing. Now it's, what you find on Twitter on a daily basis. But the scientists, there's like almost like a science cult within the facility where there's this one guy who's supposed to be like this super genius scientist, world renowned, and he's set on saving the creature. And not only that, but if I remember correctly, they take the severed arm and they harvest it, and they use plasma that they've got stored for emergencies, and they're using that to feed the pieces, and they're basically growing more things at one point, and those things have to be destroyed by the heroic captain guy. So it's not a bad flick. It's definitely worth checking out.
You're saying many themes that made it into the Carpenter version.
Yeah, and I've never listened to the audio because there's an audio reading of the book, or the novella, I should say. They are turning it into a book. Basically, they found a manuscript for an expanded version in like 2019, and I think they finally got around to publishing it, and they're actually supposed to adapt a movie based on the new version of the expanded novella. So you could call it a book if you want to, but most of everything that we've seen in film is based on the novella rather than any expanded version.
Okay.
But not having read that, I can't speak to the authenticity of most of these works, but I do have a bit of an insight into it because they actually adapted the comic books in 1976.
No shit.
So are you familiar with Western?
No.
Do you know like Dell, Gold Key, any of those guys?
I've heard of Dell.
Okay,
I
so
don't know about Gold Key.
these were the companies, like after the Wortham-inspired attack on comic books in the 1950s, and you had things like the Comic Code Authority to tell parents, no, these are okay for your kids. We only make comics for kids. We don't make comics with sex and violence and gangsters and monsters and stuff. And so for decades, the people who ruled the newsstand were Dell, and Dell was powerful enough where they didn't even need a Comics Code Authority emblem because they had licenses like Disney, which everybody knew was safe for everybody, right? And then Dell at some point got broken up. There were like some kind of problems within the company. Elements of it went to Western, elements went to Gold Key, but they continued to do that sort of family-friendly type material, but also it was very like not with the times, especially as time went on, they got less and less hip, right? And so by the 70s, Western, it still did okay on the newsstand, but they weren't, like Marvel and them were eating their lunch by that point, right? So in 76, they tried to launch a sci-fi anthology called Starstream. It only lasted about 4 or 6 issues, I don't remember which. And they'd get fairly old-timey guys working on it. Now the cover to that first issue is really cool. It was painted by Richard Powers, and it's very abstract, but I'm pretty sure, especially since Who Goes There gets top billing, I think it's intended intended to be an abstract adaptation of the story. Dark and weird and bleak, especially for a Western book. And the interiors, it's not actually at the front. It's like 2 or 3 stories deep. But it's adapted by Arnold Drake, who's probably best known for co-creating the Doom Patrol. And it's drawn by Giorgio Cambialetti and finished by Alberto Giolitti. So the first guy didn't really have a lot of work, at least not in the American market. When I went to GCD, the Grand Comic Book Database, he only had like a page and not a very long page. But Alberto Giolitti, he apparently was working for all those people like Dell Western, Gold Key. He did a bunch of Turok stuff from what I saw. I think he did the Gold Key Star Trek. So he's got pages and pages of stuff that he worked on. But it has, have you ever seen any of that Gold Key Star Trek or any of that type of material?
Let me search real quick. Gold Key Star Trek comics.
It's very static, very like newspaper strip.
So.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. But hold on, before we move on, that cover for Starstream fucking rules,
right?
And I want it. Can I get this poster somewhere? This looks awesome.
Yeah, you definitely want the poster and not the interiors, although the interiors are kind of cute. The basics of the story as adapted, which is 17 pages, is you've got scientists in the Arctic again, but they're much more scientific. They're not, like, one of the things is in all the movie adaptations, you have a lot more blue-collar type guys involved, and there's just a few scientists, where it seems like in the book, and certainly in the comic book adaptation, it's like they're all scientists, and the minority are the people who are just the workers, like kitchen staff and stuff, right? So they're exploring the Arctic. They see this impression of something in the ice. They use thermite to melt the ice to get to it. It turns out to be a flying saucer, but the thermite interacts with the engines of the spaceship and blows everything all to hell, right? And the scientists are temporarily blinded. But when they start to come to from the explosion, they can see the block of ice encasing this alien shape. So they melt around it. They pick up the thing. At one point, though, they accidentally, when they're trying to chip at the ice pick goes through a part of the ice and actually implants itself into the head of the thing. So, the thought is, well, if there's anything in there alive, they would certainly killed it by now. And so they're carrying this thing back to base, and it starts to thaw out some, and it's described in the book and shown in the comic book as being like green with 3 red eyes, and it has these long, almost like dreadlock hairs, but they're white, and they're described as being like worms, essentially. And one big difference that's I know is in both the novella and in the comic adaptation is that the creature actually has telepathy, and so it's manipulating people through that telepathy. That's all, folks. Through the telepathy before it even manages to get loose to the ice. But when it does get loose to the ice, it's actually much closer to the John Carpenter movie because it tries to assimilate the sled dogs, and they find it midway through, and there's actually this really cool, bizarro body horror moment where you see the sled dog thing, where it's the combination of all the sled dogs. I'm going to see if I can send you that picture.
Mm-hmm. Please do.
And plus, that'll finally give you a sense of how odd the adaptation looks.
Can I just say, while you're looking for that, how fucking frustrating it is to search for anything related to The Thing?
Oh, right.
Because it's
The Thing.
One of the most used words in common lexicon, okay? Second of all, it's one of the most famous comic characters ever. It's also a very popular Volkswagen vehicle, the VW thing. You cannot, there's no way to search without getting a bunch of bullshit results of everything. It is extremely annoying.
Sorry, man. Yeah, I feel you, though.
It's not your fault. You don't have to apologize. It's not your fault. Oh, how about Man Thing in my results?
Or just
how about
Ben Grimm?
Swamp Thing in my results? Well, yeah, I mean, obviously The Thing. Open larger picture. That is cool.
Right?
That's not really what I was expecting.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you look around it and it's still that sort of staid newspaper style, but then you've got this full-on weird, creepy body horror thing going on with the wolf creature.
Yeah, and it's breaking out of the panel, too. Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah.
I like it.
Let me see if I can find a picture of the actual thing so you can, for a basic comparison. There we go. There's one.
Oh, less impressive.
Right. But that is the way it's described in the book.
All right, fair enough.
Okay. You've got the wolf thing, and it's also taking over members of the crew, just like in the Carpenter version. And so, of course, that's creating the paranoia. You got people going at each other with axes and stuff. Carpenter is much closer to the book and much closer to this adaptation, to the degree that I almost think he might have seen the comic adaptation for all I know, because the visuals are somewhat similar. They do have a test for the thing in this book. What they do, though, is they take the blood and they put it in a beaker, and then they boil the beaker as opposed to the exposed wire, right? And then in the end, they all get together to make sure they recognize the science bros that they have to stop this creature or else it's going to destroy all of humanity. So they work together, they root out the people that are messed up. In the book, I don't think they do it in the comic, but there's an albatross that flies around, and they make sure to kill any birds in the area that they see because they're afraid the thing's going to take on the aspects of the bird and fly away. And they finally managed to trap the thing and burn it and kill it, and that was the end of the story. And it's got more of that Camelot era hopeful vibe to it as opposed to the dark paranoia of the Carpenter version. But still, basically, the broad strokes are similar to the movie.
Just slightly goofier.
Right, and definitely
the thing itself being
respect to the thing itself. So rather than going to the Carpenter movie next in chronological order based on production, we're going to jump slightly further ahead. The last Dark Horse comic that was produced related to the Thing is called simply The Thing, The Northman Nightmare. It came out in 2011. It's by Steve Niles and Patric Reynolds with a cover by Minton. Minton's another one of those guys who would like to be Bill Sienkiewicz and never will be, but gets closer than some. So it's not a bad little cover. And what it tells is essentially Vikings make their way to the Antarctic. They're exposed to the Thing. One of their encampments is destroyed, and they find these 3 women that were not part of the camp, and they don't know who these women are, and the women say, yeah, that some of the guys went nuts and started killing the other guys, and we're the only survivors, yada yada. Then this one other dude comes out and says, don't believe them. They're creatures. They're monsters. They're gonna kill you all. And they're like, they're women. They can't kill us. But you are probably a coward who didn't stand up to whoever you were fighting. So you suck, and we're gonna put you and the women together and lock you up. Which they do. The dude ends up disappearing, and one of the guys also disappears because he decides he's gonna try to screw one of the chicks, and he's gone too, right? And the leader realizes that something's going wrong. Things are going badly, and so he decides, well, we're going to start destroying these creatures as we're finding these creature artifacts. And so they manage to kill most of them, and it comes down to just the leader guy and one of the women. But of course, all the women are things, and so in the very end, it turns on him. And while you don't see the attack, you know that it's coming, and they're just going to wait for somebody to come and get them out of the Arctic. And I guess the assumption is that this woman must have froze rather than being found because the world didn't end in the Viking times.
Okay, fair enough.
So, okay story. One thing that was nice about it is that this Patric Reynolds guy, I don't know anything about him. I haven't seen him do very much, but his style is very reminiscent of Phil Jimenez, particularly as he got a little bit sketchier over time. And so it was a pretty damn good looking book. So this was never released as a comic book. It was a promotional piece. It was digital only, which seems like a bad call on their part. But yeah, so it only exists as digital media. There's no print version of this thing anywhere. Huh. And the reason, of course, why they did it in 2011 was to promote The Thing movie that came out that year.
48 hours ago, we found something quite remarkable.
What'd they find?
There's a structure.
In Antarctica?
And a specimen.
Really?
Touching down.
This is Kate Lloyd's, Columbia Paleontology.
Let me show you why you flew 10,000 miles. We estimate it's been here 100,000 years.
I'm going to take a tissue sample.
Do you really think that's a good idea?
Yes, I do. You, my friends, will all be immortalized as the people who made this discovery.
Did you hear that?
My God.
Somebody was attacked.
But it seems everyone is fine.
Either someone miraculously healed themselves, or someone is not who they say they are.
What was it doing to him?
It's imitating his cells. I think this thing copies its prey and then hides inside it.
What are you saying?
Not all of us are human. It could be any of us. We can't let this thing leave. If it makes it out of here, millions of people could die.
It's by a Dutch director who never did much of anything, and his name has too many consonants in it, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Do you remember that at all?
I remember some sort of remake coming out, yeah.
But
when that remake came out, I hadn't seen the original yet.
Oh,
still,
really?
and we'll get to that. So it wasn't a big deal to me.
I had heard bad things because people were just really offended that they were making this thing. And they made it clear that it was a prequel, but also it was going to be CGI effects. And I think a lot of people took great umbrage to them not doing physical effects for this particular movie.
Sure.
So I watched it knowing that going in. Also, I knew that it was Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who I'd connected with because she was the cheerleader in Death Proof. And so when I'd see her in other things, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's the chick who's in that Tarantino movie. And then over time, she became more and more of a fully fledged presence in media as opposed to just me going, hey, she was in that Tarantino flick. But back then, she was still the chick from the Tarantino flick, but she progressed from there. The movie is actually a prequel, like a direct prequel to the Carpenter's thing. And so what it tells is what happened at the Norwegian base when they first discovered the thing. And
got it.
So
I'm assuming Carpenter had nothing to do with this movie.
Nothing to do with this movie, no.
Okay, got it.
It has a lot of stuff from the original story again. They actually find the spaceship. They find the creature in ice. The creature in ice, they drill a hole. Instead of it being an ice pick, there's this one guy he's one of those billionaire guys who gets to run around and do whatever the fuck he wants to, and people have to jump through all this shit, right? So he's the guy who's leading this expedition. He insists on them drilling into the ice so they can get to the creature because they want to do some cell testing, and it goes too far. And I don't remember if it stabs the creature in the head like in the story or if it's in the body or something, but it's through that hole that the creature later escapes and starts killing everybody in the camp. They have a nice twist on how you determine who's who. In that movie, they determined that the creature cannot replicate inorganic matter. It can only replicate the living organic tissue. And so one of the things that tips off the Mary Elizabeth Winstead character, who is, I think she's a pathologist or because she's involved with forensics when we see her at the beginning of the movie. Like, I think she's involved with police forensics. And that's why they want her to help them do the pathology on the creature once they have it cracked open, because they'd already known about the creature. They just hadn't actually gotten through the ice to it yet, right? Well, she finds a bunch of teeth in a bathroom, and she figures out that the reason why the teeth are out is because they're artificial teeth, and the creature couldn't replicate those. But it's a nice, cool, messed up moment. And so she's using things like fillings and artificial parts, bolts in people's knees and stuff to determine who is and isn't a thing. Huh. And it's got a decent cast, but one of the things that's a bit of a problem is that because it's the Norwegian base, they just had a bunch of generic white dudes who could halfway pull off an accent. So you don't get to know them the way you get to know them in the other movies. So it's really focused on just a few characters. And her main co-star is Joel Edgerton, who's done a few things, but never really got to be that big of a name. I confuse him. He's one of those guys you confuse with other guys. Is he Sam Worthington? Is he Jai Courtney? It's like, I don't know. These guys all running together, right? And they end up being the main two characters by the end of the picture. And it's actually all right. Like, given that it's CGI, if you can't let that go, you can't let that go. But they do some pretty cool stuff with CGI. They definitely do some weird body horror stuff. I think there's a lot of like Junji Ito and like Japanese influence over some of the creatures that are made in this thing. But the reason why it's nice for fanboys, and I think that a lot of fanboys have kind of come back to it and given it a little bit more props in the years since, is that it's so faithful to the first movie in that they try to replicate what they saw at the camp when they first find that the camp has been destroyed. So axe in the wall, well, you see how the axe got in the wall. The creature that's half man, half thing that's been burnt in the pit, you see how that happens. So they really go out of their way to sell that. The only thing that gets me is I'm not a big fan of the ending of the movie because it seemed like they could potentially have gone really bleak. And what happens is they illustrate, like they tell you what has happened. And so what they tell you has happened isn't that bad of a thing. It's expected, let's say. But when I was watching the first time, the performances didn't match up with what they were telling you was happening. And so I thought that somebody was killed because of the paranoia as opposed to because they were actually a thing. And it's not the case. It's very clear in the movie, but the performance made me think that the movie was kind of darker than it actually was. But it's actually not a bad little flick. So if you get the chance to watch it, especially since you've gone back and watched Thing in recent years, if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, if you want more of that, that's actually not a bad way to go. And especially because, again, it's very easy to line up what happened in the 82 movie versus what happened in the 2011 movie. And it literally, the movie ends and there's a series of post-credit moments that leads directly into the movie. So I don't want to tell you what it is. You could probably guess if you've seen the first movie and you've seen what happens to start things off. But the fact they go in there and then they set all that stuff up, and they no prize it for you. It's a nice little treat, I think, for the fans.
I believe I know what you're talking about, but people may go watch the movie after listening to this, so I don't want to say it. But.
Sure. So that finally gets us to John Carpenter's The Thing. And I'm surprised to hear that you waited so long in life, because you're a grown-ass man and you're seeing the movie in recent years, you're saying?
Like 6 months ago.
Oh, damn. Okay. So what inspired you? Was that just part of your 80s?
Why the fuck are you surprised? We had this conversation.
I know, but we've had the conversation. Our listeners have not.
I know, but you go, well, I'm so surprised to hear that. Okay, so
I'm surprised. I thought that it was a movie that you were revisiting as part of this project. I didn't realize it was your first time.
No. It was, we did The Thing, The Fog, Big Trouble in Little China.
Well, right now you're naming just John Carpenter stuff. I thought that you and the wife were doing 80s movies in general.
Right, but this is a John Carpenter themed podcast. I'm telling you all the John Carpenter movies we watched. Who cares if we watched Mannequin? Well, that doesn't mean shit for this fucking podcast. So we did several of the John Carpenter movies, and several of them I had seen, several of them I had not seen. I'd never seen The Fog, I'd never seen Escape from New York, and I'd never seen The Thing. So anyway, that's what we did.
And apparently, did Fix-It say he's yet to see Escape from New York, but he saw Escape from L.A., or had he already seen Escape from New York by then?
No, he said Escape from L.A. was the only one he's seen.
And he liked it.
Yeah, sure. I've never seen Escape from L.A., so.
Still?
Yeah, because when it came out, that movie got so much shit for it even existing. Like, at least in the circles I ran in and the shows I watched, I think everybody was sort of like, this isn't what we were expecting it to be. This is just a rehashed version of the... People, like, it almost sounded like it was just a remake of the first movie as opposed to being like a sequel or something. So I don't know. And then I think also, like, I don't know if it was Saturday Night Live, or I think I saw people like making jokes about it too. So I never took that movie seriously at all. And because I never took Escape from LA seriously, I never took Escape from New York seriously. Mm-hmm. So it just escaped my purview. But yeah, we watched that one now too.
Well, and that also explains why you didn't bother with the 2011 thing, because if you'd never seen the John Carpenter one that everybody reveres, why would you bother with remake/prequel?
Correct, sir.
100,000 years ago, it found its way into our galaxy. Trapped in the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, it could not escape. Now the men of Station 4 have made a monumental discovery. An alien creature had frozen, but not to death. And man,
it isn't Benny,
is the warmest place to hide.
"72 hours ago, the 12 men of the U.S. Antarctic Research Outpost number 31 came in contact with an organism from another world. By that time, the organism had already killed or caused the deaths of the entire complement of personnel at a nearby Norwegian outpost."
It's an Antarctic expedition, correct? The movie opens with a helicopter chasing a dog, a dude shooting the dog out of a helicopter. Eventually, the helicopter lands. Don't they shoot the dude in the head?
Yeah. What they
kill the dude in the helicopter.
The guy lands, or I think what happens, the helicopter lands, and then there's like an exchange of fire because they don't know who this guy is running around into their camp shooting, and he doesn't speak any English. He shoots one guy in the leg because he's trying to get in the guy's way while he's chasing after the dog, and then the main guy in the base smashes the window, which was one of the stupidest things possible because you're in the Antarctic. Why are you smashing the windows? But he smashes the window with a revolver, and he shoots at the guy, and he shoots the guy in the head from a distance from the inside the base camp.
I'm trying to do this without getting too detailed. Okay, it's basically an hour and 50-minute long who's infected, right? They find out there was an old base. There was like some Norwegian base. At one point they visit it. They find the remains of like a distorted alien creature that's been burned. They discovered a UFO in the ice, and there's a large rectangle that has been cut out of it that presumably had the body of an alien in it, and somehow the alien has been escaped. Whether they thought they cut it out, it came to, killed everybody in the base, and now it has spread to their base via the dog.
Because they put the dog in the kennel with their own sled dogs, and then it's starts slowly making its way through them.
Except the dogs know it's not a dog, which lets you know it's not a dog. And then from there, it jumps from person to person, and then people are accusing each other of being the thing as they try to unravel some sort of mystery and figure out how they contain it.
Well, and also...
Hi, I'm Wilford Brimley, and I've had diabetes for about 20 years.
Got diabetes?
He's the one who determines, using the most archaic computer graphics possible, like straight up Atari graphics, that this is an extinction level threat, and that if this thing gets out of Antarctica into a populated area, that it's going to basically take over the entire world and kill everybody within a span of like months, like 4 months, I think what it breaks out to. And that convinces everybody they got to do everything they possibly can to try to kill this thing.
And he runs around and sabotages their helicopter and destroys all the communication equipment to just make sure that none of them get out of there alive. Right.
48 hours ago, the organism, the thing, began its assault on the men of Outpost number 31, able to infect new victims merely by touching them and assume the identity of the infected or any other animate form it chose. The thing turned the humans against one another and began constructing a craft capable of carrying it far from the frozen wastes of Antarctica to a warmer and more populated location.
It ends with a huge fight-off with the main baddie that is burrowed under the into underground tunnels under the base until it's blown up with a stick of dynamite.
24 hours ago, the thing was ostensibly destroyed at the cost of Outpost number 31 and 10 of its personnel. Exhausted from their ordeal and unsure as to whether one or the other of them might be infected by the thing, the two survivors, MacReady and Childs, decided to wait, either for rescue or for the sub-zero temperatures to kill them.
Leaving two of the characters left, but both of the characters have now been missing for a certain amount of time, and you don't know, is one of the characters the thing, and they don't know, is there one of us that is the thing, and they're basically left sitting in the Antarctic cold, freezing, sharing a bottle of scotch while they kind of sneer at each other from a distance, wondering, are you going to kill me? Am I going to kill you? Who is it? And then the movie fades to black, and you never know what happens.
And then also one thing that is, you throw out theories, is MacReady has been so determined to kill this thing at the expense of his own life, and yet at the end, when he's faced with Childs, who I think he assumes is a thing, or should assume that is a thing, he's like, I'm just too tired, we'll just sit here for a little while, we'll just wait and see. And the theory has been that, well, he's waiting for them both to freeze to death and die, and therefore they won't, the thing won't get loose. But you have to wonder if maybe MacReady's the one who got turned into a MacReady thing, since he's no longer so doggedly determined to kill any possible portal of exit for this creature. So maybe he's the thing, and it's Childs that is walking into a trap that he hasn't realized.
Yeah, Childs was mysteriously missing for a while towards the end of the movie, so you don't know if he's a thing. And then MacReady obviously had extreme contact with the thing towards the end of the movie and survives, or did he? Right?
Well, and I watched one of those thing truther videos where a guy pointed out that the studio insisted that you hear the thing death rattle when that explosion happens, because originally you just saw an explosion and you didn't know what happened. Also, they go through where when Childs is at the back door, he's wearing a jacket and there's another similarly colored jacket hanging, but then when you see him again, or they do this long pan throughout the base that's supposed to indicate the path by which Wilford Brimley got out of captivity and started attacking people, and that over that course of that path, the cold is now gone, which tells you that Childs has been turned into a thing, and because his outfit got ripped up, he went and got a new coat to replicate the coat that he had, and just like, okay, I don't care anymore, stop talking, please.
Well, and then you have, I think there are even people who worked on the movie who say, oh, John Carpenter always wanted MacReady to be the thing, and then they talk to John Carpenter. John Carpenter's like, I never said that shit. And then he likes the adaptation from Dark Horse where MacReady is not the thing, right? So it's like, but that's part of what adds to the movie, is that you get to have this conversation of who's the thing, who's not the thing.
And both Carpenter and I think Russell have both said the whole point is the paranoia, and you're not supposed to know, so we're never going to tell you.
Yeah. Let's leave it.
And we're glad we didn't ever actually do a proper sequel, because you don't need one. Leave that film.
Don't do a sequel.
But I think the circumstances.
Don't remake it either.
I think the circumstance is interesting. I think you could play with the thing in different environments under different circumstances. I just don't think you need to continue the characters, and especially please don't do who's the guy who replaced Harrison Ford as Han Solo for that one movie? Don't do that with Kurt Russell. Don't do that with Keith David. You can't. You're just setting yourself up to fail. Just don't let those characters disappear and tell a different story.
Well, so it does sound like the where was I at there? Okay, the expanded version of the novella that they found is called Frozen Hell, and it looks like Blumhouse Productions is going to do that.
That's what I was hearing.
Although that said that's from 2020 and it hasn't happened yet, so who knows? Although COVID has delayed tons of this stuff, so I don't have a clue. Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. If that comes out, I will definitely not watch it and let people hate on it. So.
Yes, your personal thing franchise is the single movie, and you share that with probably the majority of the potential audience. Like, I think most people just stick with the one movie and they're good. So having watched it, what did you guys think?
We both loved it. I think it does so one of our favorite movies is The Mist. Love The Mist. The modern quote unquote Mist with basically the entire cast of The Walking Dead in it before The Walking Dead, right?
Well, and ironically, Frank Darabont was going to try to do I think Sci-Fi Channel TV series of The Thing, adapting The Thing. So maybe it morphed into his adaptation of The Mist or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's definitely some crossover in terms of elements of the two productions.
Absolutely. Which is why when that was the first thing I thought of when you said that you had thought the ending of the prequel had been set up to darker, right? Like the ending of the Mist is like as dark as it gets, right? It's like the bleakest thing ever. Spoilers for The Mist, everyone. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I went in thinking, okay, John Carpenter, there may be some like cheeseball special effects maybe, or it may be a little hokey. It's also a very hyped movie nowadays. Like The Thing has the snowball of hype around the movie. The Thing is just like perpetual, or, you know, and I'll get suggested shit on even like YouTube and stuff just because I guess my algorithm is close enough to a lot of the John Carpenter stuff where it's like, what really happened at the end of The Thing? And there's like a million videos of people talking about the clues they see to determine who was the Thing in the end. If anybody was the Thing, does the Thing still out there? Here's who I think. Here's how I interpret the movie. There's so many of that stuff that, like, I don't know. I kind of felt like the movie was definitely had to suck.
Right. There's no way you can live up to the hype.
No way. And then the special effects are going to be practical, and practical effects have a charm, but they're not necessarily good, right? Like we even bad practical effects, you're like, I get what they were trying to do, and I know that even that poor attempt probably took hundreds and hundreds of man hours and animatronics. So I'm going to tip my cap anyway. Like, I don't even though it looks bad, I'm still wondering how they even got it to look like that, right? Knowing that this thing existed in real life. So, you know, that was where I had my expectations set. Dude, the practical effects in The Thing absolutely rule, dude. And they're doing like weird, abstract. It's not just like an alien or a stop motion dinosaur or something like that, or a stop motion monster or a guy in makeup. They're these bizarre, abstract, animatronic, prosthetic hybrids that are like with multiple faces, with eyes moving and mouths moving, all on this giant, like basically tree of organic material. So bizarre.
And I watched a video earlier today where they saw that as being a problem. Like, they knew they were going to have the monster in this movie a lot, and they would have diminishing returns. So every time you see the monster, it's a little less effective. So Rob Bottin had the idea, well, what if it's a different monster every freaking time?
Yeah.
So you never know quite what to expect, and you never get comfortable. And that means, obviously, they had to put so much more work into it and to come up with so many more designs, but they're awesome designs, extraordinarily well executed, with just astonishing articulation.
Yeah, and another thing, too, like jump scares that are 30 years old don't work the way like a jump scare does in a, you know, THX movie theater on an IMAX screen. It's like this, you know, you're at home watching it, and it's an old movie. The jump scares ain't gonna work, right? Dude, there are some jump scares in The Thing that still work, namely where he goes to do CPR on the guy in the end, and his hands go through his chest cavity, and then his chest cavity turns into teeth that bite his arms off. Like, ridiculous.
The editing on that is so good, because obviously you know, it's just split second. You're going for one thing and it turns into another thing, and it's just, again, you have that shock because, especially because it's practical, is you know exactly what to expect. You're not even thinking something's about to happen, and then the most insane thing happens.
Right? Yeah. Like, your brain would have never in a million years predicted what was going to happen there. Like, maybe he would wake up, and yeah, that would be scary. Plunging his hands into his cavity is ridiculous. The other one, like, even when they're testing the blood with the hot wire, every one where it doesn't react, you're on the edge of your seat, dude. That's just old school movie shit, right? Like,
it's Hitchcock. It's not about the bomb.
Absolutely.
It's not about the bomb exploding. It's about letting people know that there is a bomb ticking away and not knowing when it's going to go off or who it's going to go off underneath.
Exactly. Great scene. So like I'm saying, so the vibe, you have the great, you know, the trope, the isolationist survival trope that everybody falls for. Everybody falls for this. It's why, you know,
there's 40 some odd seasons of The Survivor based on this. Who's going to make it on the, who's going to leave, who's going to get lost, you know, all this kind of stuff, except it's at a fatal level.
It's more like why people love zombie movies, right? It's the human element of the zombie movies that people love, where it's like all odds are against you. You're trapped in a house. How are you going to get out?
Lack of plot armor. There's usually one or two people that have plot armor, but anybody else is imperiled.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, we don't know who's going to make it out of this movie, other than you assume Kurt Russell's probably going to make it out. But other than that, everybody can. And then it starts being who's the thing? Are you the thing? Am I the thing? Is that the thing? Is the dog the thing? We don't know anymore. Have we all been the thing this whole time? Somebody will go out in a blizzard and they don't come back on time, and then they show back up. Well, why'd you take so long to get back? And you're trying to like piece it together and figure out clues, and it's impossible. The shell game, the 3-card Monty of this movie is just fantastic. The whole time where you think you know what's about to happen, and then it doesn't happen, and you're like, no, I was following the card. But while you're thinking of the fact you know where the card is, you now have lost count of where the card was, and you're like, shit, there's only fucking 3 cards. How did I miss the card? And now I'm just guessing, right? And then you just start having to guess. So I loved it. For me, everything. It hit the excellent pre-CGI animatronic practical effects, top notch. Wasn't expecting it. The plot, it's an alien.
And just to say
right.
too,
so if you got problems with alien movies, there is a flying saucer. There are a couple flying saucers. If you ain't into that, it may throw you off base a little bit. I can understand that. The who done it, the who's who, building of suspense, the fact that like they work. So here's another thing too. They dissect these aliens, or they dissect the thing multiple times in that movie, and every time you're just waiting for something bad to happen, and it doesn't always happen bad, right? It's almost like when you least expect it, something bad happens. So you get body horror, you just get everything in this movie. I don't know. It was like for me, I thought it was. I don't know what I was expecting, but maybe because my expectations were built so high, I'd actually flipped the other way and took them too low. But I thought this was it might be one of my favorite John Carpenter movies. But we're talking maybe top 3. Like maybe They Live and Big Trouble, and this. I think I might like this better than Big Trouble. I don't know, man. I say that I've seen Big Trouble like a million times, so that's kind of a different. But I thoroughly just was. I'm not gonna say I was blown away by it. No, I'll say it. I was blown away by it. I could not believe I waited so long to watch it. It held up so well, and I see what all the hype was about. So there. Are you happy, people? I'm not hating something, right?
I'm a little surprised though that you went in there not sure about the practical effects, because you are familiar with Rob Bottin, right?
I didn't do that much research on it, bro. I don't know who Rob Bottin is.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure he's a famous dude who's done a bunch of movies that I've seen, but I wasn't like, again, this was sort of like, hey, that's a movie that everybody says I should have seen and I haven't seen it. Put it in a Google Doc. That's all it was.
Yeah. So he did RoboCop for starters.
Oh, I've heard of that.
So like he's the guy who made The Melting Man, as a for instance. So yeah, the dude's a genius. He's one of the great special effects artists of all time. With John Carpenter, he also did The Thing. With Paul Verhoeven, he also did Total Recall. He did Seven. He did The Howling, or he's one of the guys who did The Howling anyway. Rick Baker, I think, was in there too, wasn't he? Or maybe not. Maybe Rick Baker was just American Werewolf in London. And he did Legend with Ridley Scott. So this dude's like one of the top tier physical effects artists of all time. Like he's not my number one guy, but he's pretty close. He's in the top 3 to 5 for sure.
Yeah, but even those dudes are budget bound, and I didn't know what the budget ended up being for. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is this a cult classic because it was like an indie movie that caught on? You know, like I don't know.
No,
John Carpenter,
it is a cult classic.
He's worked this magic with big budgets and small budgets, so I don't know.
Yeah, it is definitely a cult classic because the movie cost $15 million in 1982 dollars, and it only made $19.9 million. So this John Carpenter is on record saying that this movie changed the trajectory of his career. That his career never fully recovered from the failure of this movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
It came out like a couple of weeks after E.T., and so the national mood was not where The Thing was at all. So the choice was E.T. or The Thing, and America chose E.T. The world chose E.T. E.T. got on the t-shirts. E.T. was in the plush dolls. Nobody had time for The Thing. And this movie was reviled when it first came out. Critics hated it. For the exact reasons why you love it is because it was so offensive. It did things that nobody had ever seen before, and it was like there was a visceral response to that. People were like, I don't know if people were vomiting, although Greg Nicotero has a story about taking his girlfriend to see the movie, and she spent most of the movie covering her mouth like she was going to puke into her hands. And there were definitely people who were walking out of this thing. There were critics who just pilloried it. It was hated. It's a movie that got revisited over the course of the 80s and came to be appreciated. And of course, horror people eventually embraced it. But yeah, it did not do well in theaters, and it was hated by the critics.
Good.
Right?
Although, you know what? So this is like...
Because, I mean, think about it. How well is E.T. How well is E.T. thought of today? Like, I think most people find
that same question. Huh? I'm asking you. We talked over each other.
Oh, sorry.
I was asking you the exact same question.
Sure, go ahead.
Who was that? Have you seen anybody that's seen E.T. in the last fucking 20 years? I don't know anybody.
I was definitely choked up seeing that movie in 1982 as a kid. Just seeing it in like a classroom in the late 80s, a few years later, I already thought it was too cheesy and I was too old for it. So I did enjoy seeing E.T. at Universal Studios theme park, and I did get get a E.T. thing out of a dispenser or something in Japan while I was there, but I don't have that lasting affection with E.T., no.
I'm wondering I wonder if E.T. got left behind for some reason. Is there a rights thing or something that why we don't see E.T. during
they didn't sequelize
Halloween every year or something?
It's kind of like, it's a lot like Roger Rabbit, is I think they realized that they had the lightning in the bottle the one time, and they couldn't really go back to the well. Disney tried with Roger Rabbit, they did a few shorts and stuff, but the effort it took to get Roger Rabbit made was so extraordinary that nobody was ever willing to take that on again. I think with E.T. it's just that they told the story they had to tell, and there was just nothing else to do with it. Like I remember, again, I was in school, and I was in English class, and the English teacher had like a selection of books you could check out from her directly rather than going to the library, and one of them was this E.T. sequel novel that was released. And I'd always be kind of curious because I'd liked the first movie, and so I asked her about it, and it was one of those moments where, obviously I didn't have any caffeine or I wasn't awake, but she said, oh, that's D-U-M-B, and that book was D-U-M-B, and for some reason I didn't spell it out, and I'm like, what's that an acronym for? I was like, no, dumb. And it's like, oh God, yeah, that's me, I'm dumb. But yeah, so she even my English teacher was not on board with the E.T. book sequel. I don't think anybody saw anywhere to go with that franchise after that.
Yeah, I mean, okay, E.T. had a renowned bomb video game, right? Like it's one of the worst video games of all time. So I would that might have actually had something to do with why the merchandising never really gained traction, right?
Well, and E.T.'s only got so much eye appeal too. Like how many kids really want to as much as they might love the movie, how many kids really want to snuggle up to E.T.? It's a weird looking creature. It's a little...
Right.
Yeah, there's some body horror elements to this guy that's like, I don't know about this thing being in my bed at night.
Was there an E.T. cartoon? There had to be, right? I feel like I'm picturing one.
I said, you saw an animated rendering of E.T. on merchandise, like lunchboxes and such, and then they had plush dolls, they had little plastic figurines. I actually think that's part of the problem. I don't think the E.T. merch did that well. The movie did fucking fantastic. It did boffo, and the VHS releases, they re-released it a few years later, and it did really well the second time too. But the t-shirts sold well, I think. I think I had an E.T. t-shirt, in fact, but I don't think most of the other merchandise did that well. So it didn't have the lasting or broad effect. It wasn't a Star Wars or anything.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Again, it was the most infamous piece of E.T. merchandising is the video game that bombed so bad they buried it in a landfill. And then there are movies made about people trying to find the dump truck.
Well, and again, that's
the E.T. video game.
That is the video games with like Turok #1 and Adventures of Superman #500 and Deathmate Red is to comic books. That video game was something that helped to kill that industry. And if it wasn't for Nintendo, video games may have never recovered from that. Like that was for several years they weren't sure video games were going to survive, and E.T. was like the harbinger of that.
Hilarious. I do want to watch E.T. again, and I kind of want to show it to my kids.
Yeah. Oh, you should have already shown it to your kids. You're actually a little, I think, almost too old at this point for E.T. I would definitely get on that right now if you're going to, if you want it to have any effectiveness.
All right. It's on the list.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Where the fuck can you see E.T. at? It's not a Disney property now, right? Who owns E.T.?
Amblin. Did Disney buy Amblin?
I have no idea.
Okay. I'm sure it's available. I don't know if it's a stream or if it's a rental, but I'm sure it's available. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Let me see. I'm surely it's somewhere. Maybe not.
But again,
anyway,
Living
doesn't
Well,
matter. This is not the E.T. cast.
True. And Living Well is the best revenge because where you don't see a lot of E.T. merchandise, lately I can't go to like a Best Buy, Target, or any place like that without seeing like Thing action figures in the NECA section and shit.
Yeah, for sure.
And
I saw some like day before yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too because again, the first adaptation, The Thing from Another World, did well. Nothing since has. They won't let this property alone because the 82 one bombed, the 2011 one bombed. All the time they've tried to turn it into TV shows and stuff has not worked out. But I think that they won't let it go in because it's so influential and so beloved by at least the minority fandom, but also because I think the merchandise must do well enough that where they feel like we got to make another movie because we're making so much money off the merch.
Bizarre.
Although we still haven't gotten a They Live sequel either, so you'd think that merch does pretty well too. I certainly see that also.
Yeah, I was skimming the Thing Wikipedia, and it sounds like Carpenter said he liked the Dark Horse sequel so much that he would consider if they did a sequel basing it on the Dark Horse sequel. So
yeah, that was an odd thing. Excerpt from the November 1991 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 196, featuring a Batman vs. Predator cover by Mike Mignola. Coming distractions for December. The Thing number 1 of 2. Picking up where the John Carpenter film left off, McCready is determined to kill the Thing before he dies. Painted art by John Higgins. Color comic, $1.95, 32 pages. Excerpt from the January 1992 cover dated Wizard Magazine number 5. Pics from the Wizard's hat. A listing listing of the hottest books shipping in December. The Thing #1. Shipping date December 15th. Artists John Higgins. Writer Chuck Pfarrer. Cover price $2.95. Inexplicably, it has a Marvel Comics logo next to it. MacReady is ready to die. All his friends are dead. His camp is destroyed. There's no equipment and he's thousands of miles from nowhere, stranded in an Arctic tomb. Yes, he's ready to die, but first he's going to take that thing with him. That's right. Dark Horse, king of the movie comics, picks up where John Carpenter's horrific 1982 film The Thing left off. Can MacReady destroy the frozen remains of the creature? And why does that sound too easy? Why don't we just sit here and see what happens? That's the famous last line of the movie, and where this little gem picks up. Solicitation copy from The Thing from Another World #1 of 2, first Aliens, then Predator, then Terminator, and Indiana Jones. Can Dark Horse do it again? What do you think? Picking up where John Carpenter's film left off. MacReady is certain he's going to die, but he doesn't care. As long as he can destroy the frozen remains of the Thing before he freezes to death. That shouldn't be too much of a problem, should it? Should it? Writer Chuck Pfarrer, artist John Higgins, letterer Richard Starkings, editor Randy Stradley, cover artist John Higgins, genre horror, publication date December 1st, 1991, format full color, price $2.95. Mike's Amazing World of Comics sources the actual ship date as December 17th, 1991, per a house ad from Aliens Genocide #3. Comic Shop News said December 19th, well, equivalent over a couple of days though. Sometime later, MacReady woke up aboard an icebound whaling vessel after being carried out onto the ice floe by Childs. Uncertain as to whether Childs might be infected, MacReady stole the ship's helicopter and returned to US number 31. There he encountered Commander Erskine's Navy SEAL team. Erskine accused MacReady of killing the men of US number 31, but before long, Erskine's own men became infected by the Thing. The battle with the newborn Thing resulted in the crash of the SEAL's helicopter, leaving MacReady and Erskine stranded. They set out to reach an Argentine outpost many miles away. Dark Horse got the rights to do The Thing, and they started putting out material in 1991, so fairly early on. You know, the Aliens only got started in 1988, and this was, of course, before they started trying to do their own stuff for like Comics Greatest World. This is pre-Legend, pre-Hellboy, all that kind of stuff. So probably they're still looking to the movies to be what's going to drive the company. And if you're looking for a property that's somewhat similar to Aliens, obviously the first thing in line was Predator, since they already had the relationship with 20th Century Fox. So they go to that next. You know, at some point they get the Terminator, but that's probably because Now was shitting the bed with it, right? And so probably they were already shopping that property around to find somebody else to do it, since they were already doing comic books of it. And so you kind of work your way back to The Thing. And that's one of the things that's kind of interesting to me with regards to the movie is I feel like there's a lot of talk about how revered John Carpenter revered Howard Hawks and stuff, but you have to figure too, where did Alien come from? Alien came from Dark Star, the student film that Dan O'Bannon did with John Carpenter. And of course, Dan O'Bannon goes and does Alien later on, and that's a huge success, makes big money. Well, the other movie that made big money around that same time was John Carpenter's Halloween, right? And, you know, Halloween doesn't put him at a level where I think he could do an Alien yet. So then he goes and he does The Thing. Oh, sorry, he goes and he does The Fog, which does fairly well. And then he does Escape from New York, which does fairly well. But he keeps making these movies where he has these budgetary restrictions. And because he'd had 3 consecutive solid earners, he finally got the budget to make his own Alien, I feel like. And that's what The Thing was. Because I think you can easily look at parallels between specifically Dan O'Bannon's Dark Star script becomes Star Beast, becomes Alien. And then John Carpenter had his role in that movie as well. So I think he wants to do his own version. And you see a lot of parallels between Dark Star and Aliens, and also between Thing and Alien. You know, it's still like this sort of working man crew, and you've still got this creature that's making its way through them, killing them one by one. They're trying to track it down. They're figuring out ways to deal with it. A lot of flamethrower action in both movies. So I really do feel like this was his Alien, but obviously it didn't do Alien business. That probably hurt the property. But of course, The Thing did well on video. And then eventually it gets to Dark Horse, and Dark Horse is the option to get the rights, even though I'm not sure who the rights holder was on that movie. Let me see who put that one out. That was Universal. So I think this probably was one of the first things they did with Universal. At some point they were involved with other materials, like they ended up doing a series of adaptations of Universal monster properties and stuff, but they didn't have the relationship with Universal that they had with Fox. So they had to go out and get this thing, I would assume. And of course they call the book The Thing from Another World. Do you know why they do that?
Because of Marvel Comics?
Absolutely.
I have no idea.
A perfect lesson in the difference between copyrights and trademark. You can't copyright Thing, but you can trademark The Thing as the title for a book. And so in order to avoid confusion, and also because, let me say, it's way easier to search for The Thing for Another World today than it was for The Thing. So they call it The Thing from Another World as and I guess probably there's some rights issues related to the original one from the 1950s too, so might as well take advantage of that. And so they do their new version. They've got the screenwriter from Darkman, which again, Darkman was a Universal picture, so that's probably why they have a screenwriter that's related to Universal adapting it. And it's painted by John Higgins. If familiarity with him?
Oh man, it sounds familiar. I don't think so.
So
maybe
if you look at the covers that they have, it looks very much like he's getting that Rob Bottin vibe down in them. The interiors aren't as strong, but they're okay. He doesn't do a lot of stuff in comics. I know he's done trading I'm pretty confident he's done trading cards. He's done various covers. He's done some painted projects. The one that most people refer to is World Without End, because they literally say that they're using that format for the Dark Horse comics when they have the guy who painted that comic work for Dark Horse. And it's only 2 issues, and if I remember correctly, they're square bound, so at least they're double length, so it's essentially a 4-issue painted miniseries, but it's released as 2 issues. The Thing #1 ranked 54th place in the top 100 comics for December 1991, as reported by Diamond Comic Distributors Incorporated to Wizard Magazine #6. It was the lowest selling Dark Horse comic title of the 6 to make the list, but the company published a lot more than 6 comics, so not bad. It was also one of the 4 top picks from the Wizard's hat in its 5th issue, but not in its successive issues. Capital City reported sales of 20,175 copies. Excerpt from Dark Horse Insider, Volume 2, Number 3, cover dated March 1992, with a Thing painted cover by John Higgins. The Thing from Another World, number 2 of 2. Dark Horse presents another great motion picture spin-off in the tradition of Aliens. Screenwriter Chuck Pfarrer, Darkman, and painter John Higgins, World Without End, wrap up their 2-issue tale by pitting MacReady and Childs against an alien life form that could be inside anyone. 32 pages of Antarctic action that ends in terror aboard a nuclear submarine. Cover painting also by John Higgins. $2.95 US, $3.50 Canada, 32 full-color pages, no ads, World Without End format, painted cover, shipping March 10th, 1992. This is also the date used by Mike's Amazing World of Comics, based on both the Dark Horse Insider and a house ad from Cheval Noir number 28. Library of Congress listed as March 17th, and the Capital City Usenet lists March 18th.
They set out to reach an Argentine outpost many miles away, only to meet up with Childs and the Argentines. Once at the Argentine base, it was discovered that Erskine had been infected and that the Thing, in Erskine's guise, was going to rendezvous with an American submarine at a nearby bay. MacReady and Childs reached the submarine just before it submerged, but the, by now, monstrous Thing caused the boat to ground itself on an underwater ledge. In a last-ditch effort to destroy the Thing, MacReady blew the sub's hatches, flooding the interior with near-freezing seawater. Apparently the only survivor, MacReady reached the surface, only to face the sub-zero temperatures of the Antarctic dawn.
I don't think it's a particularly adaptable screenplay. We already saw the best parts of that movie, and you're just sort of doing a retread, and I just don't think it works that well. But apparently John Carpenter liked it fairly well.
All right, fair enough. I was gonna say, as you were saying it, I'm like, it kind of just sounds like you're rehashing the first movie a little bit. Although, given the nature of the powers of the Thing, I mean, unless it's like the Thing takes New York or something, like it's gonna kind of be the same thing. No pun intended, or whatever.
So I don't know how. I'll check to see. I'll post sales numbers as we go along. I don't know that it did all that well, but I don't think it did all that badly either. I guess it did okay, because they continue to do Thing material. Sadly, the Thing fell right out of the top 100 after its debut issue. Oh wait, it was just delayed to February, and Wizard listed it as number 1 instead of number 2. The Thing is a slippery one, you know. It dropped 9 slots to 63rd place, but it still managed to beat Young Indiana Jones Chronicles number 1 in 72nd place. Wait, this was a 2-issue miniseries, and number 2 is in the March 1992 top 194th place. It was the 4th of 5 Dark Horse titles ranked, ahead of Hardboiled number 3 in 96th place. I guess there was a resolicitation at some point. Second issue Capital City sales were 13,125, which is a loss of 7,000 copies, so I bet you there's not a lot of complete sets out there. Excerpt from the May 1992 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 201. Comics bestsellers for March. All figures from the March 1992 Capital City Internal Correspondence newsletter. Figures represent direct market retail orders. Numbers in parentheses represent a title's overall position on the charts. Top 10 independent comics in circulation. At number 1, Youngblood number 2. At number 2, Aliens High number 2. At number 3, Terminator Hunters number 1, which was 36th overall. In 4th, Next Men number 2. 5th, Hardboiled number 3. 6th, Dark Shadows number 1. 7th, The Thing number 2, which was ranked 102nd in overall sales circulation. 8th place, Young Indiana Jones number 2. 9th, Solar number 10. And 10th, Magnus number 10. Dark Horse was the number 3 publisher with 5.98% of the market. It was behind Marvel at number 1 with a domineering 52.87% of the market, following by DC's 17.86%, trailed by Malibu's 3.06%, Valiant's 1.65%, Innovation's 1.32%, Eclipse's 1.06%, Viz's 0.9%, Comico's 0.85%, shared by Fantagraphics. By the way, I found it really strange at the time that Marvel released a 4-issue miniseries titled Adventures of the Thing that ran from February through May of 1992, with new covers by Sam Keith and Joe Quesada, reprinting random decade-old Marvel 2-in-1 stories. I only now realize that they were reinforcing their trademark in the wake of the Dark Horse Thing miniseries released released a few months earlier. Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider number 7, July 1992, with a painted John Bolton Army of Darkness cover. The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear number 1 of 4. After his ordeal in Dark Horse's first Thing from Another World series, MacReady awakes to discover that he's been transported to an Argentinian military base far from Antarctica. But so has the Thing. Get ready to strip down to gooseflesh. As writer John Arcudi, Aliens Genocide, penciler Jim Somerville, Aliens Newt's Tale, and inker Robert Jones turn up the heat on the creepiest monster of all time. Painted cover by Thing from Another World artist John Higgins. $2.50 US, $3 Canada, 32 color pages, painted cover, monthly, shipping July 21st, 1992. And Mike's Amazing World of Comics agrees with this date, sourcing not only the Dark Horse Insider, but also Previews, Volume 2, number 5, and A House Ad in Dark Horse Presents number 63.
Apparently the only survivor, MacReady was rescued by the Argentines and evacuated to a research station in Tierra del Fuego. Unfortunately, one of the evac team was infected by the Thing. Freed from the Antarctic cold that had effectively held it prisoner for 1,000,000 years, the Thing began to spread to new bodies, causing all the base's personnel to suspect one another, and plunging them into a climate of fear.
And this was more of a standard comic book. It's 4 issues like they had done with all the Aliens miniseries and the Predator miniseries, Terminator miniseries, and it's by one of the talents associated with that, John Arcudi is the writer. It's drawn by Jim Somerville, who is the guy who did Aliens Newt's Tale, which was a sort of a sideways movie adaptation of Aliens, and it was inked by Brian Garvey. And this one I think was a lot better, at least because it's somewhat different. They still have painted covers on it by John Higgins, so you have that continuity from the first series. And what happens is the Argentinians who had that base, they find MacReady on the ice floe, and they save him, and unfortunately they take him back to Argentina. And along the way, they also bring the Thing with them. And so MacReady is trying to convince people, A, that there is this thing that they have to worry about, B, that he's not a crazy person who killed like a submarine full of people, and also they have the personality dynamics of all the people that are at the Argentinian base. MacReady gets loose and he wants to make sure they have like livestock because they're sort of remote and they're living off the livestock, and he goes in there and starts killing all these lambs they've got because he wants to make sure that they don't get infected by the Thing. But of course they stop him because they think he's a nutcase. But true enough, the Thing has taken over one of the lambs, and then it starts killing human beings and taking over them. One of the things that's nice is it's the illustrator has a really detailed style. He's just doing a lot of crazy rendering, and it's definitely more of that like a Mike Plug, Bernie Wrightson kind of quality to it, where it's sort of got that EC quality to it, but it's also modernized. It has a lot of heavy detailing. So Somerville never really had much of a career in comics, but he does a really nice job with the comic book. And even though it's not painted like the Higgins miniseries, I think it just has more of an energy to it. It's more dynamic. I think the Higgins stuff, because it's painted, it's sort of slow looking. It doesn't have the same energy, that flow to it, where they just kind of go balls out with it. And what's really interesting to me about the miniseries is this miniseries came out sometime around the same time that Kyle Hotz was first getting started in comics. I think his first book was Cold Blooded for North Star, and because I remember picking that up, and I think it had a Kelly Jones cover on the first issue, and the interiors were just awesome, and I felt like I got in, I think that was his first work, so I got in very early with Kyle Hotz. And there's a lot of similarities between Jim Somerville and Kyle Hotz. So just picture in your mind what a Kyle Hotz drawn Thing miniseries would look like.
Yeah, love it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
A Kyle Hotz drawn Thing adaptation sounds amazing.
Yeah, it looks freaking great. Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider number 8, cover dated August 1992. The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear number 2 of 4. Nerves are on edge for residents of the Argentine base at Bahia Thetis. And no wonder. At least one person in the camp is really the Thing. Tension turns to terror as writer John Arcudi, Aliens Genocide, penciler Jim Somerville, Aliens Newt's Tale, and inker Robert Jones breathe life into the creepiest, most insidious monster ever to leap from celluloid to the comics page. Painter John Higgins, World Without End, provides this issue's mind-expanding cover. Monthly, shipping August 18th, 1992. Mike's agrees with this date, citing both the Insider and a house ad inside Dark Horse Presents number 64.
The Thing began to spread to new bodies. The base's personnel began to suspect one another in MacReady, a situation that made it difficult to fight the horrifying new manifestations of the Thing. The sudden appearance of Childs, apparently alive and well, in the company of a U.S. Navy combat team, gave the beleaguered group new hope of destroying the Thing and getting back to civilization alive. But those hopes were dashed when a test designed to flush out those infected by the Thing indicated that MacReady himself was infected.
Obviously the Thing is slowly making its way through all the Argentinians, and there's like one Argentinian dude who's like in love with this one gal, and it's really not reciprocated, and he's not the smartest guy, so people who work with him, some of them follow him, some of them think he's kind of a dope, and so he has these issues. One of the things almost gets a hold of him, and he saves himself by chopping off his own arm, and he's just like, he's a bit of a fuck up in the story, but you feel for him because things just don't seem to work out for him, and he's trying so hard and he's so committed. Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider number 9, cover dated September 1992. The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear number 304. MacReady thought Childs was dead until his old friend showed up at the Argentine base with a contingent of American commandos. But is it really Childs, or yet another incarnation of the shape-shifting Thing from Another World? And how can MacReady be sure he himself isn't infected? By Arcudi, Somerville, Jones, and Higgins. Monthly, shipping September 15th, 1992. Mike's agrees, echoing the issue of previews, volume 2, number 7, and a house ad from Dark Horse presents number 66. And that was more or less the same date listed in Comic Shop News number 271.
With MacReady on the run, Childs ordered the base personnel confined to their quarters. Suspicious of Childs, Sergeant Agapito snuck out of his room. Meanwhile, MacReady managed to convince Dr. Viale that he was not infected and that Childs must have corrupted MacReady's blood sample, a theory confirmed when Childs began to transform into a horrible monster. Solicitation
copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider number 10, covered in October 1992, only rating a half page this time. The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear number 404. Writer John Arcudi, Alien Genocide, penciler Jim Somerville, Alien's Newt's Tale, and inker Robert Jones bring down the house in the conclusion to Climate of Fear. MacReady discovers that the Thing has been busy building a ship, and it's up to him to destroy the alien before it can take off to a more populated area. But how much good is a can of gas and a torch against a monster the size of a locomotive? Cover painting by John Higgins, shipping October 20th, 1992. As the miniseries progresses, it turns out that Childs has been infected by the Thing, so now it's a Childs thing. That's one thing that's interesting too. You probably noticed this from the movie, but if you watch any of those videos you talked about, one thing they do, I think going back to the original novella, is once you're taking over or you're replicated, you become your name and thing. So it's a Childs thing. It's a, whoever, what's the doctor's name?
Oh, shit.
You're a Blair thing. You're a Niles thing. It's just, it's an interesting way of defining who's what.
Dr. Copper.
Yeah, so you're a Copper thing.
Copper
thing. Yeah, there you go. One thing that's nice too with the miniseries, I'm looking at it again, it actually gets better as it progresses. The art gets stronger as it goes along. With a lot of these miniseries, they start off with all the best intentions and they're just really killing themselves in the beginning and then they just wear out. But this miniseries, it just looks better as each issue progresses. And it all ends up with the lady doctor chick and the one-armed soldier guy and MacReady trying to destroy the Thing. And thankfully, there's military that comes out and just starts napalming the area. And that's what kills the Thing. And ultimately, it's those three are survivors. That's how that miniseries ends. I did like that one better. Obviously, the art was a huge motivator, but also the story was just more entertaining. And at least it went to a different place. At least it's not the Thing in the Arctic with the same two guys all over again.
So see, I'm trying to find pictures of this. Kyle Hotz did Swamp Thing too, right?
Did he?
Apparently, or is it Man Thing? Man Thing, Swamp Thing. I'm getting all sorts of results that are not what I'm at.
See if I can find a nice shot and I'll send it to you.
Damn you! I think I found one that he posted on his Facebook page, or it's a shot from a Screen Rant article.
Here, I found one from I was trying to find something that would make sense out of context.
I sent one that I found.
Oh, that looks cool, but that's not from the miniseries though. That's Jim Somerville, or is that Kyle Hott? That looks like Kyle Hott.
It says, yeah, it's from his own Twitter account. So
Somerville's?
No, Kyle Hotz.
Okay, so it is Kyle Hotz. Okay, so that's real Kyle Hotz. This is Kyle Hotz alike that I just sent you.
Oh, my bad. Okay, gotcha. That's pretty cool. I dig it.
The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear number 1 was a Wizard pick in its 12th issue. However, I could find no evidence of any issues of the miniseries in the top 100 comics lists. Capital City sales for the 4 issues were 12,550 copies for 1, 10,475 copies for 2, 9,775 copies for 3, and 9,075 copies for 4. The top comics of 1993 featured no books involving The Thing from Another World. But amongst August 1993 trade paperbacks, The Thing from Another World and Climate of Fear collection was ranked 11th in unit sales, 14th in dollar sales, $15.95 cover price. It was pushed out of the top 10 trades by the other Dark Horse collection of that month, Martial Law, Blood, Sweat, and Fears. Yeah, Fears. For some reason, they listed Tears, but it's Fears. Solicitation copy from Dark Horse Comics Insider, number 21, cover dated September 1993. Dark Horse Comics number 13. Okay, what are the odds here? A small group of colonial marines, deep underground with no usable transport and minimal firepower. 40 bazillion ill-tempered aliens. Could be bad. Find out for sure in part 2 of Aliens Backsplash. It's just a pinball game, right? Nothing to cry over. In Predator Bad Blood Part 2, Chris discovers that not all the players are obnoxious city slickers, nor are they all human. Also in this issue, there's nothing wrong with doing a little research, unless your research research involves the deadliest organism on Earth. Catch the thing from another world. Questionable research. Part 1 of a new 4-part Thing series. Forget the skies. Watch your back. Painted cover by Killian Plunkett. Advisory suggested for mature readers. $2.50 US, $3.15 Canada. Monthly shipping September 28th, 1993. Do you remember Dark Horse Comics? Not the company, but the magazine or the comic book.
Not really.
No? Okay,
No.
before your time?
Probably.
You know Dark Horse Presents that.
I'm very aware, yeah.
I was saying, I hope so. So, you know, how Dark Horse Presents was black and white, and there's a mix of licensed material and create your own stuff, and just sort of a mixed bag anthology.
Yep.
So, Dark Horse Comics was an attempt to do a more commercial version of that. So, it was full color. It was almost all licensed properties and Comics Greatest World characters. The first issue had a quadruple gatefold painted cover by Dave Dorman with RoboCop, a Predator, Time Cop, which was his first comic book appearance, if I recall correctly, before the movie, and someone who was going to be in the Aliens Predator miniseries that Chris Claremont was doing. And then one of the serials they had over the course of its life, it only lasted a little over 2 years, was Thing from Another World, Questionable Research. Solicitation copy from the October 1993 cover dated Dark Horse Comics Insider number 22. Monthly shipping October 19th, 1993. Dark Horse Comics number 14 premieres part 1 of the Mark, Taking Back the Streets, a sharp-edged tale of a country torn by revolution. Luzzani's current leader, the Archon, leaves for the United States. But will he be able to return, or will he become Luzzani's newest political exile? Also this month, in the final installment of Predator Bad Blood, the Predator decides it's time to really go to town, with a vengeance. Although laboratories are supposed to be safe, clean, and efficient, when tempers flare, accidents can happen. In part 2 of The Thing from Another World, Questionable Research, when accidents happen, things get very much out of control. Color cover by John Rohn, monthly shipping October 26, 1993. Okay, so this one was written by Edward Martin III, who didn't do much of anything. He just did a few Dark Horse things and he went away. It was drawn by Ted Naifeh, who ultimately would do Courtney Crumrin, which is a pretty cool, like, gothy Harry Potter comic book thing with more of a bleak, dark quality to it. I like it quite a bit. And it was inked by Moose Baumann, who eventually became a really noted colorist, but at this time he was working as an inker. Naifeh, not really ready for prime time. It's pretty freaking rough art. You know how, especially in the 90s when things were really going full gusto, anybody who could hold a fucking pencil was being given work. This very much looks like he's one of those guys who could barely draw, but they're letting him do a comic book that's going to get colored and inked and everything else, and he's just not ready for prime time. He gets better later on, and he's got a variety of styles too, because he can do more cartoony stuff and he can do more realistic stuff, and he did a lot of like good girl stuff as well at one point in time. I like his work, just not at this point in time. Solicitation copy from the November 1993 cover dated Dark Horse Comics Insider number 23, Dark Horse Comics number 15. The Mark, What Goes Around, concludes in this issue of Dark Horse Comics when the Archon, Luzzani's despotic leader, finds himself in America at a time when his country is ripped apart by revolution and riot. But the Archon has his own plan and no revolution in the world can stop it now. Gerald Coyle was a smuggler of alien products, royal jelly, xenozip, and other things. It was a lucrative occupation, but without retirement benefits. So he arranged his own retirement benefits via the Drug Enforcement Agency. In part 1 of Aliens Cargo, he discovers that such a plan definitely has a downside. Also, in part 3 of The Thing from Another World, Questionable Research, the scientific team aboard the Donacek discovers that their research really can get the best of them. What can you do when your experiment has its own hidden and horrifying agenda? Painted cover by John Higgins, monthly shipping November 30th, 1993. The serial is a direct sequel from the first movie, where you've got scientists who are investigating the base, the American base that MacReady was in, and they're finding bodies and such. And one of the wikis was saying that they'd found Childs and MacReady's bodies as well, but I don't see that in the story. So I think that was them supposing rather than having hard evidence of that being the case. So it doesn't necessarily contradict anything that happens in the other Dark Horse stories. But anyway, they take a sample of one of the aliens, or sorry, it is an alien, let's be honest, it's an alien thing. But they take a sample of the thing that they found, the body, I think probably the main alien that was supposed to be killed at the end, the same one that's causing problems in these other miniseries. They take it onto a boat to study it. It gets loose. It starts taking people over. There's these fucked up character dynamics where there's one guy who recognizes the threat this thing poses and just wants to destroy everything. And there's another guy who's like, no, the science, the research. And then also that guy's got his wife with him, but he's also got a protege that I think he might be having an affair with. And so it gets kind of messy. Solicitation copy from the December 1993 cover dated Dark Horse Comics Insider number 24, Dark Horse Comics number 16. Tony Vincenzo is what you might call a family man. So is Bernie Jinx. Up until now, they had their own little disputes in the heart of Manhattan. But this time around, someone's knocking off both Vincenzo's and Jinx's boys. Vincenzo's in the slammer, but he isn't telling everything. The truth is too unbelievable, but he has a plan. Don't miss this issue's premiere of Predator: The Hunted City. Also, Aliens Cargo concludes in this issue with part 2, as Coyle realizes being getting trapped with an alien isn't as bad as he thought. After all, he has his wits and a 5-minute head start. What more do you need when you're faced with the universe's most voracious and hungry xenomorph? In the pyrokinetic conclusion to The Thing from Another World, questionable research, Douglas finally realizes what he has unleashed, and it's up to him to stop the thing in its tracks, even if it means sacrificing himself in the process. Painted cover by George Pratt, monthly, shipping December 28th, 1993. But ultimately, everybody ends up getting killed essentially, except for the one scientist guy that was refusing to destroy the thing. The ship sinks, and he's on a board, like floating through the water, and then a bird lands, and he sees its eyes, and he realizes it's the thing, and he sees it flying off, and he can't kill it in time, so he knows that he's essentially into the world with his bullshit. So that was an interesting little serial that didn't get picked up on.
Interesting. All right.
Dark Horse Comics number 13 featured capital sales of 9,200 copies, which is exactly the same number as they had of issue 12, which did not feature The Thing from Another World. Dark Horse Comics number 14 had capital sales of 8,475 copies, so about 500 down. Among November 1993 comics, Dark Horse Comics number 15 was ranked 217th in unit sales, 188th in dollars. It sold 13.4% of, I believe, Amazing Spider-Man would have been the book that month that they were tied to as far as their ratios go. Capital City reported sales of 8,850 copies of this issue. This was the one with the Thing cover painted by John Higgins. It actually saw a bump of about 400 copies from the previous issue. The only difference I can see is the Thing painted cover. I'm not necessarily giving credit to the Thing, I'm just saying. So December 1993, comic book sales to comic shops, estimated comics pre-orders by North American comic shops, based on reports from Diamond Comic Distributors as listed on Comicron. Dark Horse Comics represented 3.57% of the market of magazines and comics. They did much better on their backlist, like trade paperbacks. They represented 11.39% of the market. In the top 300, Dark Horse had 18 comic books. Ranked number 1 for Dark Horse was Star Wars. Tales of the Jedi number 3 at 44th place overall. Predator Bad Blood number 1 was in 2nd place and 87th overall. Sin City: A Dame to Kill for 2 was at 3rd place for Dark Horse, 90th in comics overall. 4th place was Aliens Colonial Marines number 8, 120th overall. 5th place was John Byrne's Next Men Faith number 3, 123rd overall. 6th place was Out of the Vortex number 3 at 141st place overall. 7th place was Grendel Tales number 5, 145th overall. In 8th place was the Godzilla vs. Barkley special, 168th overall. The Mark number 1 was in the 9th place for Dark Horse, 203rd overall. And rounding out the top 10 was Dark Horse Presents number 80 at 206th overall. But Dark Horse had 3 slots, 206, 207, 208 to themselves. At 11th place was Dark Horse Comics number 16. It had a sales rating of 178th place with a $2.50 cover price, and its ratio to Amazing Spider-Man was about 12.6. Capital City reported sales of 7,775 copies. For whatever reason, Dark Horse Comics number 16th ranked above The Thing from Another World Eternal Vows number 1, even though Capital City sold the exact same number of copies and it had the same ratio to Amazing. Plus it had the same dollar, but one was 178th place, one in 8th place, so I don't know what that. Behind Eternal Vows on the rankings for Dark Horse were Indiana Jones, Thunder in the Orient, The Shadow in the Coils of Leviathan, Age of Reptiles, the first issue of Enemy, the last issue of RoboCop Mortal Coils, and Hammer of God Pentathlon. And as part of Dark Horse's final big rally for the property, new miniseries debuts, The Thing from Another World, Eternal Vows, number 1 of 4. Police Sergeant Rowan arrives at Wallace Harbor from mainland New Zealand to investigate a baffling series of murders on isolated Stewart Island, and is sickened by what he finds. What Rowan will soon discover is that The Thing from Another World has finally made a beachhead on the doorstep of our civilized world, seeking out new flesh and ready to wreak the necessary havoc to get it. Paul Gulacy specifically asked Dark Horse to allow him to draw the Thing, and called upon his friend and native New Zealander, David Vries, to script a taut tale of small-town paranoia. Paul's pencils are ably embellished by Dan Davis's ink, and each issue of the series will include a Gulacy color cover that wonderfully evokes the feel of all those great hoary 50s sci-fi monster movies. Written by David DeVries of Eternal Warrior Yearbook, penciled by Paul Gulacy, Comics Greatest World Barbed Wire, inked by Dan Davis, Comics Greatest World Barbed Wire, color covered by Paul Gulacy. $2.50 US, $3.50 Canada, 32 color pages, color cover, monthly, shipping December 14th, 1993. And then the final Dark Horse miniseries, although again, we're fucking around with the chronology because obviously they do the stuff with the prequel later on. But the last published Dark Horse material is Eternal Vows, 1 through 4. That's published in late 93 and early 94. I think it comes out on time, but it's a 4-issue monthly. That's by Dave DeVries. Are you familiar with him at all?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That doesn't even sound familiar.
I know that the art team of Paul Gulacy and Dan Davis is more familiar.
Yeah, for sure.
Gulacy, although I've got to recheck on that pronunciation. It might be Gulacy, or there's various ways apparently you can pronounce that. I've been saying Gulacy for decades because there was a retailer who corrected me when I used to say, say Gulacy or Gulacy, and I think he said no, it's Gulacy, and so that's what it's saying for years, but I might be mistaken. I was recently corrected because when Garth Ennis was doing like Hitman and Hellraiser and stuff like that, Hellblazer, I was saying Garth Ennis, like Guinness, Ennis, you know? And then at some point somebody corrected me that it was Enos, and I was just recently corrected, no, it really is Ennis. Quit saying Enos. It sounds like you're saying penis. It's like, yeah, I always thought that too. But it apparently is Ennis, and I should have followed my instincts on that. So I don't know if my instincts with Gulacy are correct, but anyway, it's Paul Gulacy. It's one of my favorite comic artists, so that certainly doesn't hurt. And then Dave DeVries did an Australian superhero team at one point in time, and he got to start, I think, working on Australian Penthouse, doing a sexy strip with a guy named Glenn Lumsden, who has a Gulacy-like style, and I've always really liked his stuff. He's never been a big name, but he did some really nice looking stuff. In particular, they did a Phantom miniseries together for Marvel that had a very strong Brian Boland quality to it, who's another one of his influences. But my favorite stuff of his, he did Puppet Master comics for Full Moon that were published through one of the Malibu imprints. In particular, I had a Comic Shop News where they did a cover that was Puppet Master, but it was done in a very Gulacy style. And so that was one of the Comic Shop News I actually kept for 30 odd years now because I just loved that image so much. Same with one of the Jim O'Barr Crow images they used as a cover, and a Paul Gulacy James Bond image, which may or may not have come from Serpent's Tooth. I think it actually predated Serpent's Tooth, but it's him sitting on a stool surrounded by sexy Bond chicks. Anyway.
Oh, right on.
So I think, so Paul Gulacy did the covers for when Aircell brought the Bodyguard strip from Penthouse Comics to America and printed it as like a 4-issue miniseries. He did the covers for that. And I think he did some of the covers for their superhero book. I think it was called Southern Squadron, but I'm not sure because there's a couple of books that have similar names, but it was the Australian superhero team that they did. So I think that the association from them being involved with the Bodyguard together influenced them bringing him on to write this miniseries. And specifically, Gulacy wanted to do a Thing miniseries. He asked Dark Horse if he could do the next miniseries. So this is something he really wanted to do.
Wow.
And Dave DeVries is from New Zealand. So even though he wrote an Australian superhero team, but I think back in the 90s, they knew that nobody gave a rat's ass about New Zealand. That was before Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff brought New Zealand into focus for people. So he just wrote Australians instead. And he mostly worked with Australian publishers. So it was to his benefit to pretend to be an Aussie. But they actually set this story in Wallace Harbour, New Zealand. It's not actually on the island itself. I think it's like an island off of the island because they wanted to have at least some containment. And so it's a fishing village, and it starts with a fisherman feeding a cat, and then it cuts to lovers. One of the people is a sailor on a ship called the Gettysburg. He's an American, and it's a fishing vessel, and it's docked in Wallace Harbor. But they've basically been locked there because recently there's been a string of murders around the harbor, and so while he was stuck there, he hooked up with this New Zealander chick. I don't know if they'd been together previously or not. I thought there were some elements of adultery there, but I don't think they were actually married to anybody after all. So they're just like illicit lovers apparently. And so they're getting it on while other people are being investigated for these murders. And there's like this, inspector guy who's running around checking on people, trying to find out what's going on. So the fisherman guy gets killed, and at first they make you think that it's a cat that he was feeding fish to. But eventually you see the cat itself get killed by the lady lover. It turns out that she is a lady thing. Solicitation copy from the January 1994 cover dated Dark Horse Comics Insider number 25 with an X cover. The Thing from Another World, Eternal Vows, number 204, which has been reduced to a half-page solicitation, by the way. Sergeant Rowan finally gets some answers from Arcudi about the true nature of the Thing. As more people on Stewart Island turn up dead and mutilated, clues lead to the American ship, the Gettysburg, docked in Wallace Harbor. Meanwhile, Jennifer's own little private hell gets a little bit smaller as she struggles with the Thing and her lover Powell for control of her memories and desires. The series is written by David DeVries, who brings the kind of authenticity of dialogue and place only a native New Zealander can to the story. Pencils are provided by Paul Gulacy and inks by Dan Davis. Each issue also includes a wonderfully evocative Gulacy color cover. Monthly, shipping January 11th, 1994. Then you go into the second issue, and there's this black dude that's been running around too, and you kind of think like maybe he's going to be our POV character because there's not a lot of characters in this thing. We already know that by the end of the first issue, the lady's lover is dead, and she's a thing, so that leaves the inspector guy and the black guy. But then the black guy gets attacked, and you think he's a goner, but it turns out actually the black guy had already been attacked by the male lover of the two, who had then assumed his form, even though the actual black guy's out there somewhere, but he's just playing a game with the lady lover. So they have a very different take on the Thing in this miniseries. It's much more conscious, it's much more deliberate, and they introduce this idea that once you've been intermingled with the Thing, that you still maintain some of your own identity and your own consciousness and your memories, but also your victims' memories are also shared with you, and you can take a variety of forms at your choosing. So, and they're like playing games and stuff. So obviously that's much more deliberate and less of an alien creature, but actually it derives from, there were some spin-off stories that have been written about the Thing, and I think it may have borrowed from from one of those, or maybe vice versa, because I'm not sure about the timeline. But people have played around with the mentality of the Thing, and there's at least one novella out there that's written from the Thing's perspective, including up to the ending of the movie with MacReady and Childs. And it confirms that Childs is a Thing, and it's intentionally pretending to be human around MacReady in hopes that they'll both get rescued and it'll just make its way to society, right? So anyway, so you're thinking, okay, who's the POV character on this thing? And then all of a sudden MacReady shows up, drawn by Gulacy. So he still kind of looks like Kurt Russell, but it sort of feels like maybe at some point somebody told him that they don't have the imaging right, so it's like they kind of fucked with it to make him look less like Kurt Russell. There's a few parts where it's like the facial features are so far off, it's like Gulacy's better than this. I don't think he's fucking up. I think somebody made him not look like Kurt Russell for some reason. So MacReady shows up, and this is where things kind of, it's already bad enough. Like, I don't feel like MacReady is a character that you have to have in all these things, right? I think that he's somebody who was good in the story that he's in, but I don't think he's your Ellen Ripley or anything, right? As much as you like Kurt Russell, Siskoid has a whole show about the appeal of Kurt Russell, but honestly, I think that MacReady is one of his less compelling characters. I don't care about MacReady one way or the other. It's certainly not to follow him. So to have him like intentionally going to places in New Zealand and hunting down the things, and I don't know how he's supporting himself. I don't know who's paying for this. It's just this bizarre, like, kind of, this is going to be our protagonist and we're just going to will it to happen without it necessarily making a ton of sense. So MacReady's investigating. He finds one of the victims and he sees that the victim hasn't been turned into a thing, because he cooks his knife and he tests the blood. And this is one of the things that drives me nuts about the comics, is they just won't develop new ideas in the comic books. They're so slavish to what they're adapting. In, I think, every single Dark Horse comic, except for the one from 2011, they have a sequence where he does the thing where he lights a wire with a flamethrower. Like, somehow he manages to have access to a flamethrower and then randomly a wire and does the same test or a slight variation on that test in every fucking comic book. It's just ridiculous. Like, you do something else. Do something at least slightly different. The closest thing they have to this is that he used a lighter to light his knife and then dipped it in the blood. That's the closest thing they have a variation to this thing, right? So while he's investigating, he gets arrested and he's in the jail, and they manage to clear him because he didn't arrive, and he flies his own plane to New Zealand, which is already kind of a tricky thing to pull off, because I think he's supposed to be riding around like a little personal plane. So like, how does he even make it all the way to New Zealand? But the flight log show that he hadn't arrived in time to be involved with any of the murders, so they're letting him go, but they also know that he's involved somehow, and apparently the New Zealand legal system is different than the US, so he can't just plead the fifth. They're not going to let him go until he tells them things they want to know, regardless of whether or not they think he's the actual killer. And so eventually they have arrested the black dude, and he has been turned, and they do the test on him. He starts turning into a thing. MacReady burns him up, and then as he's burning in the jail cell, he starts to turn back into the woman lover, so they know who to look for, because since they're showing all the forms that are associated with that particular incarnation of the thing, they're able to see who it's been in contact with, whose DNA it's replicating, and can go backwards and see who infected him based on who he turns into. So it's kind of a weird vampire sort of thing, right? We're trying to go back to the master and shit.
Yeah.
Solicitation copy from the February 1994 cover dated Dark Horse Comics Insider number 26 under a painted John Byrne Danger Unlimited cover. The Thing from Another World, Eternal Vows number 3 of 4. MacReady, the Thing's first and worst nemesis, is going to extremes to keep it from migrating beyond Stewart Island, New Zealand. He couldn't care less about Jennifer's problems and coming to terms with her newly realized status of being deceased, not to mention being an extension of the Thing. But while he's got the Thing coming at him from one direction, he's got the disbelieving Wallace Harbor townsfolk coming at him from the other. It's making it very difficult to do what he really wants to do, torch the whole dadgum town. Monthly, shipping February 8th, 1994. So in the third issue, they find the lady, because since her lover had already been killed and known to have been killed, they had told her about, like, they had questioned her, and so they know who she was when they saw her in the jail. So they go to try to kill her in her room. She breaks free, runs away. And another thing they do in these comics that's really irritating is that they already speed things up in the prequel, where they make it, like, one of the things that's nice with the Thing is it takes a little bit of time to turn into another person. And so that's why you have those, like, shades of the Thing where it hasn't completely turned into the other person yet. It's doing weird kind of pod people, invasion of the body snatchers kind of stuff, like that one guy who does the moan and everything. Well, in all these comic books, it's like it touches you and boom, you're a Thing. It's immediately happens. And I think that's something they do in way too many sequels and way too many ripoffs, is that insta change means that you're just not having enough story to tell us anything besides creature goes from this thing to this thing. It just, so it escapes, it turns into another girl, it infects another guy, so that it helps them. And basically the infection grows really rapidly and mostly takes over the town to the point where it's mostly just MacReady and the inspector guy left. And MacReady ends up getting pushed off a dock, and the inspector guy tells him to swim to the Gettysburg ship. And then he burns as many people as he can, and then he shoots himself in the head and hopes that the fire is going to take all the things that are on the island. Fourth issue, MacReady gets to the Gettysburg. He he's hoping that he's gotten away from things, but he finds a woman's body in one of the life rafts, so he knows that there's a thing on the ship. It turns out to be the captain. The captain manages to kill most of the crew before MacReady can do anything about it. But one thing that's also weird is that Gulacy often will render the thing as a sort of purple people eater. It's just this big weird purple thing with all these little human parts on it. So for a guy who asked to draw the thing, he's not necessarily the best person to draw the thing. I think Somerville is actually better at doing it. Certainly Higgins is better at painting it as well. So it's just sort of an odd combination. But what he does like doing is drawing sexy chicks, and they managed to do sexy chicks and body horror throughout. So that's nice.
I was gonna say, so I'm scrolling through issue 4, and it looks good except for the thing, and he is noticeably going out of his way to draw these chicks as hot and as naked as possible.
Yeah, he's having fun.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the Gettysburg is sunk, and it seems that most of the things have been killed, but the one lady survivor turns into the crab legs head, but it's got this weird, like, deformed quasi-human head, and goes after MacReady. He manages to kick her into the water. She's floating down to the bottom of the sea. She's recollecting her romance with the thing that he'd already killed. There was a representation of her lover. Her memories are starting to fade, but they also show her come into contact with fish eggs at the end. And one of the things you find out over the course of the miniseries is that her lover got infected because a thing fish had gotten on board of his ship and taken him over. It's implied that she's going to infect these fish eggs, and maybe we're going to continue to have stuff happening as a result of this. But that's the end of the comic books, chronologically speaking, in terms of like the story chronology.
I did not have Paul Gulacy drawing the Thing adaptations and or sequels at any point in this podcast.
Right.
So I learned something new today. And this is weird. I was just going through the art while you were recapping it. It is some weird stuff. It is definitely out of the normal Paul Gulacy purview that I'm used to seeing. Except for the mostly naked chicks.
Right.
That is on brand. It's definitely Paul Gulacy.
Yeah, I like the art overall. It's just like you said, he wanted to draw the Thing, and then he's one of the worst artists drawing the Thing.
Yeah, you're right. It's just a big purple monster. Who gave the purple? Whose idea was it for purple?
Right.
Very strange. Like, I think if it would have been, maybe they were like, it can't be skin colored, but yeah, I don't know. That was a weird choice. I mean, it doesn't make it awful or anything, but it is just a weird choice.
Well, and also, you've got those bizarre Rob Bottin creature designs, and like Gulacy's is just kind of generic comparatively.
Yeah.
And you've got Matthew Hollingsworth doing the coloring, and he's a good colorist, and I think he does a good job on everything else, but then the Thing is just this purple thing. It's just odd choice.
And the weird, so there's one shot where hot naked chick has tentacles coming out of her, and it's like wrapping up a cat or something, and it's like everything is great about the image except for the alien tentacles that just look, they could be vines, they could be ropes, like, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of missing something, but I overall I'm still good.
Yeah, well, it's still Paul Gulacy. If you like him, then you're gonna like that. But also, he's always been fairly dependent on photo reference. But you've got the movie. He could have just looked at the Carpenter movie and he'd have been set. But he does these kind of more of a 50s kind of goofy thing, It's almost like he wants to do the Thing from the 50s instead of the one from the 80s.
Very interesting.
All right, in January 1994 sales, Thing from Another World, Return of Vows #2, ranked 221st in units, 206th in dollars, 10.5 versus sales on Amazing Spider-Man, and Capital City sales were 5,800 copies, which was a loss of about 2,000 copies. February 1994 sales ranked Eternal Vows #3 in 226th place in units, 215th place in dollars. Only sold 6.6% of Amazing Spider-Man. Capital City sales were exactly the same though, 5,800 copies. Final issue Eternal Vows had a Capital City sales through of 4,775 copies, a loss of about another 1,000 copies.
There is a one of these pages for sale for like $350.
Figures right.
I mean, even though it's Paul Gulacy.
Yeah, but my thing is like something like this a few years back would have been under 100 because nobody, with the exception of maybe a page with MacReady in it, none of these characters do anything, become anything. So and the property isn't anything super hot. So like maybe if you're getting that one page where they've got color hold and it's a flashback to the movie, then yeah, okay, I can see somebody paying for that. But for just a random page with the Thing on it, like why would that be hundreds of dollars? Except now everything is hundreds of dollars and nothing is under $100 unless it's absolute trash. And the stuff that you used to be able to get pages for $15 or to $50, but from these no-name people, and like even their shit is close to $100 or more now.
True, but I mean it's Paul Gulacy.
Well, in this case, yeah, but I think you could have gotten Paul Gulacy stuff cheaper, and you may still be able to. It could be just that the internet prices are what they are, and then if you catch a dealer and you're pulling stuff out of his bins, you might be able to get a better deal.
Sure. Anyway, I sent you the page. You want to check it out? But
see, I was trying to see it.
Okay, interesting.
For some reason, it's not coming up for me. Let me try it again. Okay, here we go. Oh, that is a nice page, though. You got a nice big facial close-up. Okay, I can see can see going for that. Not me personally, but I can see somebody going for that.
Or best offer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want a piece of Paul Gulacy art with essentially like a mini splash on it, I mean, I think that's fairly reasonable. Anyway, sure, it doesn't have like a name character, but it kind of does.
Yeah.
Because he's McCready. Anyway. All right, moving on. Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, that's most everything. So the one thing I didn't really talk about is I came to the thing in the late 80s. It was on channel 26, so the version I saw was the TV edit, so I probably missed some of the cool gore effects. And it was a similar situation with me and Escape from New York. Like with Escape from New York, I saw that imagery a lot, especially in the early days of VHS. You were always seeing that cool box art on the VHS cover of, like, I think it had the fallen Statue of Liberty, like in Planet of the Apes, and it's like him running around the ruins of New York and stuff. And of course, there was a time period where we were all about post-apocalyptic, post-nuke narratives, so they played into that. And I specifically remember going to like flea markets and such, and you would occasionally have booths that sold VHS stuff, and somebody would be playing parts of the movie at one of the flea markets, so I remember seeing it there. The Thing, not so much, but I was aware of it because, you know, it's just one of those things that people would talk about every now and again. You'd see it at the video store, but I never rented it. I just saw it on TV, and it was a similar issue like what I had with Predator, where the story is so macho, it's so male-oriented, and all these guys are so taciturn. You know, they're not the most talkative of people. They definitely have personality, but they're kind of aggressive with each other, and it just didn't really resonate with me. And the alienness of it was also familiar to me because since I'd seen Aliens, the 86 Aliens with all the Colonial Marines and all those cool characters, then I go and I watch The Thing. Those characters aren't as cool as Colonial Marines. Like hardly anybody is, right? And so I kind of held that against it a little bit. So when I revisit it, I respect the hell out of it. I love the character designs. And when I watched it this last time, just that cast. There's so many that guys and people that I remember from 70s and 80s TV shows and sitcoms and shit like that it's just kind of a cool time capsule. And it's really well shot. It's a really good looking John Carpenter movie. I respect it, but it's just not one that ever really bowls me over. It's like, I think all the movies are pretty good. I think probably I like the 50s one the best just because I enjoyed it when I watched it as a kid and I still was amused by it as an adult. But the Rob Bottin effects are fucking phenomenal. And I'm not going to turn down the opportunity to watch The Thing again in the future. It's just not one I have a passion for. And then, like, if I'm putting it in the hierarchy, I definitely put Aliens on top, and I'd probably put Predator over. I would definitely put Predator over The Thing because they're just more good entries, and I just have a greater affection for Predator. So that kind of gives you a sense of, as much as I shit talk Predator, The Thing comes out below Predator for sure.
Okay, interesting ranking. I thought we were talking John Carpenter, but that's fine.
Well,
Go ahead and branch
John Carpenter too.
I can't rank The Thing versus Predator. I don't even know. I wouldn't even know how I even begin doing that. Doesn't make any sense to me. These are like apples and
oranges. Well, I will say I prefer the effects on The Thing over the original Predator, but I think the movie is more fun. I enjoy watching Predator as a movie more than I do The Thing. And it's cooler characters too. The characters are so fucking cool in Predator versus The Thing.
Yeah. I mean, let's not go crazy here. I don't want this. My brain can't comprehend this comparing The Thing to Predator. I can't do it. I refuse to do it. I'm not going to partake in this conversation.
Yeah. I will say I prefer The Thing over Escape from New York too. I'm really not wild for Escape from New York. I rewatched that one recently as well, and I'm just not. The whole Clint Eastwood impersonation thing just doesn't do it for me. The basic story is okay. I like Lee Van Cleef in that one. He's cool. Obviously Donald Pleasance is cool, but I definitely would rather watch The Thing. It has just a better cast and a more interesting story to tell.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I really liked Escape from New York, but again, it could have been a product of expectations. But I really enjoyed Escape from, and it's really short too. Escape from New York is not a long movie at all. I don't believe. At least it didn't feel long. But no, The Thing is definitely a more complete, better movie.
Yeah, and I like it better than The Fog. The Fog I only ever watched on Channel 39 on TV, so it's still a TV cut. I think the pirates are cool, but I can't get excited about The Fog rolling in and her climbing on top of the awning of the radio station, all that kind of stuff. It just didn't really do that much for me. But obviously he retreated a bit after this movie. This movie wasn't the success that they wanted to be. It cost a fair amount of money, and so he retreated doing a Stephen King adaptation. He did Christine, but I like Christine, and then he did Starman. Have you ever seen that one with Jeff Bridges?
I remember it coming on TV, and I would watch some of it on TV, but I wouldn't say I've sat down and watched the whole thing from credit to credit.
Since you're doing Carpenter movies and since you're doing 80s movies, I think you'll be surprised at how good Starman is.
Okay, cool.
Like I actually have that one on DVD. I haven't watched it since I bought it on DVD, but I liked it so much when I saw it on VHS as a rental back in the 80s, either a rental or a dub, I don't remember which, that I made sure to pick it up when I had the opportunity on DVD. It's surprisingly good. They even did a TV show for it because it was so well received, and it helped to kind of raise his stock again. And then he went and made Big Trouble in Little China and then dropped the stock all over again. And I think that was his second and final chance at being a commercial success because they never gave him a budget after Big Trouble in Little China. Like none of his movies had that kind of budget ever again. But nothing touches Big Trouble for me. Big Trouble is on a completely different plane from anything else Carpenter did, including Halloween. Big Trouble is one of my favorite movies of all time. Nothing comes close to that in the Carpenter ouvre. But I do like a lot of his stuff. And I mean, I think you and I have even seen some of his stuff. I know you and I saw John Carpenter's Vampires together, right? With James Woods?
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, but I haven't thought about that movie since we've seen it.
Right. And then I think it was me and Fix It that saw Ghosts of Mars, but were you there too?
No. I didn't.
Yeah, with Ice Cube?
No, I don't believe so.
And then I think Natasha Henstridge of Species and Pam Grier was in that one as well. Not a good movie. That's definitely a movie I'd go many years between ever thinking about. But, you know, and then of course he did They Live, and we love They Live. And actually that's one of the things too is I think I'd seen They Live before The Thing, and so I was way more into Keith David in They Live versus The Thing.
Oh, yeah, he's a stronger character in They Live. They Live, man, see, movies like They Live and Big Trouble are like part of the texture and quilt of my being. So it's hard for me to even like compare movies to those movies. They're just part of my life. I don't know. It's weird. I just saw those movies perpetually on TV when I was a kid growing up and thought they were just the coolest shit ever.
Yeah.
So, and to this day, I love those. I think They Live is art. It's art. It's just a cultural masterpiece. And yeah, Big Trouble is just, it's hard to like, I don't know. Big Trouble, it's almost like you had to be there. Big Trouble is one where if you just show someone cold, they're like, what the fuck is this movie? It's so bizarre, but I defend it till my dying breath. I love it.
I honestly, I will judge you based on your reaction to Big Trouble in Little China. It's like you're either in or out. That's one of those movies where if I don't think you will appreciate Big Trouble, that puts you on a different level. You're not going to be able to get to the full friend benefits because you didn't like Big Trouble. It's a personality defect as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, like we can quote it all day. Like, forget that. If you can't quote Big Trouble, I'm very suspicious of you. Are you some sort of spy? Or are you from another country? I don't know what's wrong with you.
It shook the pillars of heaven.
But it's so weird. I love all these Carpenter movies, but it's just so weird how many I still have. I haven't seen Halloween in forever. I need to go back and maybe for Halloween I'll watch Halloween.
I'm a Philistine. I actually like Halloween 2 better. I'm one of those guys. There's definitely a group of us where Halloween's the one that everybody reveres, and it's the one that starts it all, and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, but they don't have the cool gore effects, and they don't have as many. The breasts aren't as high of a quality. I like Halloween 2.
Oh, by the way, speaking of Alien and speaking of VHS, you know Romulus they're gonna do a limited VHS release for it.
I know, that's bizarre.
Is that weird?
See,
How crazy is that?
Like, I'm not on board with the LPs. I'm not going to embrace LPs. I was there the first time, but I get it, or at least I kind of get it. I love the big image. I think that it's cool that you have the ritual of taking the vinyl out and putting it on the turntable, and it's just so much more tactile than bringing up an MP3 and shit. And it's still a superior sound. It sounds great. Yeah, you got the pops and stuff, but you also have that warmth, that character that you just can't get with digital. So I totally get why you get into LPs. It's just not my bag. But VHS, man, there's no upside to VHS aside from it saving your place, if it doesn't get eaten along the way. Why? And I get to, like, you can put them on a bookshelf and they're kind of cool to display, but nowhere near as cool as a Laserdisc or an LP. So it's like, it's just weird to me. Like, I understand vintage, but why would you need a brand new VHS? Why?
Well, that's what, like, I don't get cassettes. People are,
oh God, yeah.
Although I bought a cassette today, so I can't shit on that. But I found a Check Your Head cassette for like $4.99, so I bought it. Beastie Boys Check Your Head. I don't know. It's like the cassette is just, and the VHS, they're not weird enough. Laserdisc is where it's at, dude. If you were going to get weird on me and say, let's watch it on Laserdisc. I don't fuck with the tracking on your VHS. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. To me, I don't really get it either. I don't, I better rewind this before we take, what? No, come on, man. Throw a Laserdisc in there. That's what I want. That's how we're getting weird. Bring me I want to see your Laserdisc player, because it's as weird as the Laserdisc itself.
Hey, it's funny that
and I still kick myself when I found that place that was just like liquidating on Craigslist, and the dude had a wall of Laserdisc players, like a wall, and it was pick any one you want for $25, and then he had 2 milk crates full of Laserdiscs, including like Playboy Laserdiscs. Like he had Reservoir Dogs, Top Gun, like name movies, not just a bunch of bullshit. Although Top Gun sucks, we've talked about this. And then he had like Playboy Laserdiscs, and I'm like, why did I not just buy all of that? I could have probably offered them $40, and she would have given me 2 Laserdisc players and both milk crates. And I don't know why I didn't do it.
God,
but whatever.
That's definitely a kick kicking yourself moment for sure. It's funny that you bring this up because we were on a road trip but there is a museum of psychiatric research, sanitarium museum. And so me and my gal, when we were on this road trip, we stopped off to check it out at her insistence. And so we get in there and it's got, straight jackets and electroconvulsive therapy materials and all kinds of weird stuff like that. I'm not super into it because I've gone to a lot of medical museums around the world. I think Edinburgh had an incredible one. I think London had an incredible one. And so to see this little, because it's the house. It's literally like a converted house that's off the side of a hospital in that area. So I'm not really super into it. It is kind of cool though, is they've got these gigantic books with all this information about patients and diets and stuff like that. And literally these things are 3 feet across and probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall. And just trying to flip through it is itself just a challenging proposition. But I go into one room and they've got the media that they show the patients. And I don't remember seeing any VHS tapes or anything. They had laser discs. They had stacks of laser discs. And that was the most fascinating thing to me in the whole museum because I'm trying to take pictures of it. I remember they had MASH and they had a bunch of other ones, and I'm just trying to, I think Rocky, and I'm just trying my best to take as many pictures as I can without making too much noise or being too much of a distraction. And of course part of me is can I buy these? Well, can I give somebody some money and just take these with me? You don't need all these, do you? Because they literally had dozens and dozens of them. They had stacks a foot tall, probably 4 to 6 stacks foot tall of just laser discs from the early 80s from the Sanitarium Museum. So just putting that out there. Now they didn't have any absolutely I have to try to stick this thing into my coat kind of situations, although I didn't look that closely either. But it just the novelty of it, and just they had some pretty good movies from that time period, but they didn't have the thing or anything. I think they didn't want to set anybody off for starters.
Sure. Vintage shit. We've somehow fallen into talking about it. Probably my fault.
Shit, let's be honest. The comic books and the movies are vintage shit. So there's Hey,
everybody, thanks for listening to the Thingcast.
I was a devoted collector and retailer eventually of comics over the course of the second volume of Dark Horse Insider. So pretty much every issue of this book passed through my hands. First run, I didn't see any value in them at that time though, and so I ended up throwing them into cheapy bins in one of my shops. But over the years, I did pick up a few for various reasons. For instance, I got the one that had a martial law back cover, which I'm not sure the image was in any of the actual martial law miniseries. Plus, it featured black and white Kevin O'Neill artwork, so that made it something worth picking up. So I had a few of these lying around, and then because of the Aliens project, I started buying more and more of them to the point where I now have a near complete set. And over the next few months, I'm covering a lot of Dark Horse materials from various points in time, but especially 93, 94, 92, 91. So I figured, okay, since I got to go through all this material anyway, let me just start from the very beginning and just go issue by issue, do readings of all the solicitation copy and bonus features in those comic books. And it's hard not to get a sense of these projects winding down because sometime in the late 20s, early 30s, the projects mostly stopped. I had to go back and find all the RoboCop material, the Thing from Another World stuff, the final Terminator miniseries from the original run of Dark Horse material. I don't think the Dark Horse Insider picks up in time to catch the second run of their material. We've already gone through all the classic Dark Horse Aliens material, all the Predator stuff, essentially. There might be 1 or 2 things left, but I'm not seeing that. We've covered Virus, we've covered Species, and there's really not that much else from Dark Horse that I would care to cover. I might do something with the Comics Greatest World Dark Horse Heroes at some point, but I don't see myself going into a solicitation copy depth on that. Maybe I can catch some interviews or some universe building material in there. I do feel a little bit of an ache to do some of the James Bond stuff, but if that ever happens, that's years out. Indiana Jones is a real possibility. The Dark Horse material doesn't excite me that much, and I already missed 40th anniversary, but if I'm still doing this in 2031, maybe it'll happen. Despite having a show literally called Dark Horse Presents and another show that occasionally co-ops that term, I'm never going to actually cover the book Dark Horse Presents. I was never a big Dark Horse guy, really. It's just they had licenses that I have an interest in, and I've gone back to look at because I have the time, the resources, the curiosity. Martha Washington never really grabbed me. If we ever do Hard Boiled or Sin City, which we probably will, that's going to be on the Underguides podcast. We don't do deep dives into solicitation copy like I do here. You're asking the wrong guy to do anything with Godzilla. You know I don't give a shit about the Star Wars stuff. Fuck manga, fuck Tarzan, fuck Doc Savage. And getting Dark Horse Insider has inspired me to pick up other publishers' books like this, or not even books really, let's be honest. It's flyers. Usually they're more like pamphlets. So I'm not sorry I have the near complete set. I will probably go ahead and finish the set, but I think a lot of that comes down to completionism. I'm just not going to have a lot of opportunities or reason to go back and look at this stuff again. I'm glad I had it. It's been a nice resource. It's kind of a neat thing to have a set up since it's not really that common, but we're graduating. My Dark Horse period is ending. the shows I've been doing related to this material may or may not continue past 2025. And it's hard not to notice that ending because as I'm going through these insiders, I go from issues with tons of material that I'm reading off of to whole runs where I'm not getting anything out of it because we're done already.
Anna Adams, The Bat Pod, Bella Robinson, Billet Spy Vinyl, Billy Hines, Comics Enabler, Borg, Chris Dunford, Chris Lydon, The Comic Crush, Comics and Such, Dave's Comic Heroes Blog, Del Dracula, who added, "You can listen to this if you want to hear my nonsense take on the series Aliens Kidnapped, or you can listen if you want to hear what the sinus infection that I still have as I type this sounds like. You also do a comic strip about the miniseries, but only Blue Sky users can see that. You Threads dorks can go screw. Derek W.C. Dirk Ashton has finished KRZ2, Thunder Kraken, whatever. Ed Mortail Productions, Imetin Alama, Flex Mortis, Gas 55555, Gavin Rizza, hashtag True Believer, yes, Hal Colbeck, Irredeemable Shag, Jean-Bernard Francois, Jarrett Keane, JMT Productions, Julie Raoul, Keith G. Baker, King Dinosaur, Lamar the Revenger, Lorenzo Sleestack, Maxo, Meme-Stealing Raccoon, Mike at Megamike20, Mike may have eaten all the caramel apples in his area, Orky Boy, Presidential Candidate Kirk Spencer, Relatively Geeky Podcast Network, Sam the Excitement, Sim Titulo, Specific I Am Ray, Stop Let's Team Up, a comic podcast, Superbound, Talk Nerdy to Me, Twins Are Rising, and William Voyage. Also, I don't know why I kept saying Argentinians instead of Argentines. It's just easier to say for starters.
This has been a Rolled Spine podcast. All audio samples are believed covered under fair use laws. No copyright infringement is intended.